الخاسرين. In the name of Allah, the Gracious and Merciful. This day all good things have been made lawful for you, and the food of the people of the book is lawful for you, and your food is lawful for them. And lawful for you are chaste, believing women, and chaste women from among those who were given the book before you. When you give them their dowries, contracting valid marriage, and not committing fornication, nor taking secret parameters. And whoever rejects the faith, his work has doubtless come to naught, and in the hereafter he will be among the losers.
Jazakumullah. A'udhu billahi shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. My name is Abdul Salam Bhatti. I am the host of a new series called Quran Supreme. I need to introduce myself a little bit more in detail so I can be so I can relate to some of you here so you guys understand where I'm coming from. I am a Waqf. I was born in this country and I was raised in this country. My experiences here have always been around the Jamaat. And growing up, year after year, I've realized and I fully have committed towards the teachings of the Holy Quran. I fully believe that every iota of the Quran is a supreme truth. And I believe that the Quran is here to put us on the path of the mighty and the praiseworthy. This program is designed to help a lot of people that have issues. And we will go topic to topic, but the first topic that we wanted to explore was a topic of chastity. Now, to prepare for this program, me and my co-host here at the Sir Bhatti, we have dedicated around 20 hours just to practice for this session. But beyond that, we've done many, many hours of research. I would say probably over 100 hours. And we've been talking about this issue for probably around 10 years because this is something that's personally affected us. I myself, in terms of my personal life, I see myself as a very simple person. I try to fix things myself and I try to get things done myself. I don't try relying on too many other people to help me out. I do accept help. However, I like to try to find, the cheapest and the most practical way of solving my problems. That being said, on another note, I like to think deeply about, topics, religious topics. And I like to think about them and I like to explore the way Allah Ta'ala has guided us on how to deal with issues through the most perfect book, which is the Holy Quran. And me and Tasir go back a long way in that we like to communicate about these things. We like to exchange ideas, and my strength is my ability to figure out unique solutions to problems that people haven't really considered or things that people have forgotten. And Tasir's ability is that he's very good at analyzing and he's very good at slowing me down in terms of making me explain myself so that a third party can understand a bit better. Together, we're here to help everyone here to be inspired. We're not here to do a presentation. We're here for performance. What that means is that I'm not here to just, give out information to you. I'm here to talk to your hearts. I'm here to implant ideas into your hearts about what the Quran is and what it can be, and also what station the Quran is. Because nowadays it seems like we have a lot of people who came to this country and may have forgotten. Frankly, this society is a great society. However, we must also understand that we live in the age of Dajjal, the greatest fitna. And that being said, there might be a lot of people that need assistance. Now I'm going to allow my co-host here to do a little bit of introduction, then we're going to get into our topic for today.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for that. So, like my co-host, I also fully believe that every iota of the Holy Quran is the supreme truth. I was raised here and I went through the educational system here. Because it's relevant for this session, I'm married. I don't have any children. Some people close to me say that I'm analytical and thoughtful. I don't consider myself to be a great orator. So that is why I'm going to say this dua here that was actually said by Hazrat Musa alayhi salam when he was instructed to deliver God's message to the Pharaoh's court, and he prayed. It's like can actually be found in the Holy Quran in chapter 20. verses 26 to 29. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. And the translation is, O my Lord, open up for me my heart and ease for me my task and untie the knot of my tongue that they may understand my speech. So I'd like to start off with that, and I won't say much else because I don't like talking too much about myself. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah. Me and myself, this is good. Me and Prince are here. Me and Tasir are here, and we like to bounce ideas off one another. And then when he says things, I'm reminded myself. I'm also married. I've been married for 7 years. I was married at the age of 25, and I have one child. However, what we want to get into is how to help a lot of people. The reason why this program exists is that there are a lot of you who are young, and there are a lot of you that are a bit older than 15, say 20, 25, and there's some of you that are young fathers that are passing through a test or have passed through a test. To give a metaphor, to give an example of what we're speaking about, everyone who's come to this country, the first generation that comes through, I would say that it's very similar. The process of them being introduced into this country and going through the gauntlet of puberty, it's very similar to a process that occurred on D-Day. If there are some of you that don't know what D-Day is, D-Day was basically a landing on Normandy. Normandy is a beach, and on this beach there was a landing for Allies to enter in to basically liberate France from the Nazi rule. When people came onto this beachhead, they had an idea of what was going to be there, but they didn't really understand the horror that was going to occur in front of them. And as people got off the armored boats and had to run up the beach, there were German Nazis sitting in pillboxes with MG-42 machine guns shooting at people as they're running across, trying to get up the beach. How I feel in this age of Dajjal is that a lot of us that enter into puberty, a lot of us didn't have anyone to assist us at that age to really understand what we're going to go through and understand the problems that we're going to have as we grow up. Me and my friend here, my co-host Tasir, we are veterans of that war. We have ran up the beach, we have stormed the pillboxes, and now we're looking back and we're seeing those who are, just turning into Hadam now, trying to get off the boats and being gunned down. And also those of our comrades that are all around us that may not have reached the end of the beach. And now what we're going to do is we're going to explore the proper way of how to survive this. Because in this situation, we have a lot of people who want to grow up and have successful lives. However, in order to attain true success, we must understand that success comes through the guidance that is in the Holy Quran. That being said, we all have to understand that the Quran itself is not a book that is supposed to be taken lightly. If we truly understand what the Quran is, for me personally, the Quran has been almost like a miracle. Actually, it is a miracle. It has allowed me to understand that there is a creator and that he creates things with a specific purpose and reason. And when we have an issue, like in this case, the struggles we had to go through after puberty, the way we handle how to resolve these problems is to explore the Quran. However, before we must explore the Quran, we must first understand what it is and where it's coming from and where it's supposed to take us to. Every day, we read Salat, and when we perform Salat, we say in Surah Fatiha, guide us in the right path. What is that path? And the two paths that were improper paths, the path of those who incurred thy displeasure and the path of those who've gone astray. The problem is that the path of those who've incurred thy displeasure, incurred thy wrath, and the path of those who've gone astray, those are people who either reject what the Quran has to say, or they introduce a new philosophy. And that philosophy has a process of degrading the ability for man to be on the proper path. And at that time, after that first Surah Fatiha is finished, the very first verses after that in Surah Baqarah mention what this book is. And it's very important that we understand that this book is a perfect book. The word that is used is that this is the book. However, this is the perfect book. It has no doubt in it. It is a guidance for the righteous. What that means is that everything in this book we use to determine how to live a righteous life. Later in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala also mentions about what path we're supposed to be on. We say it's a straight path, but Allah Ta'ala describes what the straight path is. And in Surah 14, verse 2, Alif Lam Ra, this is a book which we have revealed to thee that thou mayst bring mankind out of every kind of darkness into light, by the command of their Lord, to the path of the mighty and the praiseworthy. What that means is that if we follow the teachings in this book, not only will we be strong in terms of a material sense against external enemies, but also internally too, against our own shaitan. We should be able to capture and control that shaitan. We should be resilient for both external and internal forces. That being said, that this book is what we need to follow. So these problems we have in terms of chastity and marriage, if we follow the process that is laid out through this book, we will be better off.
Like
However, go ahead.
in that verse, basically the mighty refers to your like external struggles, and the praiseworthy refers to your internal struggles. And basically, it's that in order to get on the path of mighty and the praiseworthy, you have to follow the Quran.
Yeah, and a lot of us grew up here and we didn't really have an idea what was going to happen. Frankly, when I was, you know what, we'll start the first poll for this one. Growing up here, when I was in elementary school, my parents didn't really understand what they were teaching us. As far as they understood, it's school. They send you to school, they don't really think much about it. But now as an adult, I understand that a lot of the society indirectly may not be intentionally. There's things that indoctrinate you. So the first question I want to ask you guys, growing up when you guys were in elementary school, how many of you guys were introduced to things like Valentine's Day cards, where people had these little boxes on their desk in which people traded Valentine's Day cards to one another? How many of you were introduced to that? You know, and when we get the answer for that poll, we'll talk about it a bit more. But the reason I bring this up is that this book was designed to put us on that proper path. However, how do we read the book? Do we just read one verse and then we implement that verse? Or is it a book as a whole? You know, in Surah 3, verse 8, there is a structure here that shows us how we're supposed to interpret the information in this book. And it goes, he it is who sent down the book. There are verses that are decisive in meaning. They are the basis of the book. And there are others that are susceptible to different interpretations. But in those hearts is perversity, pursue such thereof as are susceptible of different interpretations. Meaning that you have to have an open heart to be a believer, to really understand what this book is. Seeking discord and seeking wrong interpretations of it. And none knows its right interpretation except Allah and those who are firmly grounded in knowledge. Those who are firmly grounded in knowledge, that's my own words here, now going back to the Quran, they say, we believe in it. The whole is from our Lord, and none heed except those gifted with understanding. What that means is that if we're going to formulate a plan of how to solve this chastity issue, solve this marriage issue, we must take the whole of the Quran, not nitpick certain verses, but understand the Quran as a whole. Even in the structure of the Quran, we have to understand that it's not a linear structure. It's almost shaped like a tree. There's different branches that all go back to the primary trunk of Surah Fatiha.
And everything in the Holy Quran, like, you know, to get an interpretation of it, one interpretation supports the other. So like if there's an incorrect interpretation, it will be, you know, basically not supported by another part of the Holy Quran. So the Holy Quran supports each other, and that's how you know the interpretation is correct.
And there's some people who think that there's certain verses that don't apply at our times. There's certain things that may have applied back then, but they're not really relevant now. And that's a false concept. Perhaps there are verses that are there that apply to certain situations. For example, if a man only has sons and no daughters, and there's verses that recommend how to do inheritance for daughters, and in that case, it's not applicable. However, the Quran as a whole, the philosophy of the Quran and the teachings of the Quran always apply.
So it's timeless, but it can be circumstantial.
Yes. And Allah Ta'ala describes this in Surah 14, verse 25. Dost thou not see how Allah sets forth the similitude of a good word? The example, this is my words now, the example of a good word. And again, back to the Quran. It's like a good tree whose root is firm, whose branches reach into heaven. The next verse after that. It brings forth fruit at all times by the command of its Lord. And Allah sets forth similitudes for men that they may reflect. This is a great example because if you know anything about harvesting fruit, you know that trees have a certain season. However, this specific tree, this tree that's supposed to give us a good manifestation on this world for a structure to build a society that is a mighty and praiseworthy society, this will always give fruit. That means that when we have a problem, like you're 15 years old and you have these feelings and emotions, however, no one's telling you how to express them in a halal way. You go to the Quran to understand exactly what to do. When you go to other sources, you are using those sources as a form of guidance, not the Holy Quran. That's why we must understand, if we want to solve this problem, we want to use the Quran to solve this problem. Me personally, go ahead.
Yeah. Basically, what you were saying, to solve this problem, any problem, the Quran, has a solution. If you don't use the Quranic solution, then the problem will, not be resolved in the proper way, or, you know, not be resolved at all.
Let's see. All
Where is
right.
this poll on the chat?
No, I don't think Zubair. Can you put on the MK Connects 2020 Brotherhood chat about the Valentine's Day poll, and then we'll. There you go. There we go. So we'll let people answer that, and we'll continue. So on your phones, there's two things I want to mention. On your phones, you'll have access to the polls to see we can get responses down. And then we'll have the reference form. So if you want to know about the way we're explaining these verses, if you go to this reference form, you can click on these little blue links and I'll actually show you the long commentary and exactly in the Quran dictionary where we're getting our information from. So that way everyone's on the same page. I'm not going to go so much into detail to explain every little verse because we don't have that kind of time. Really what we're looking for, this program, is a form of mercy for those who are 15, 16 years old. A lot of you guys are growing up and right now you have these emotions and feelings, but you feel lost. You're like, what am I supposed to do? How am I even supposed to find a spouse if nobody takes me seriously? I'm a young child, according to them, and I have no means. And they're looking for someone to take care of their daughter that has money. How do I fit into this situation? And for those that are 20 to 25 that are not done school yet, you're thinking, I need companionship. This is a painful experience. How do I face this issue? And it's not like I'm sitting here waiting and nothing's happening. There are people that are pursuing me while this is happening. And those who are a bit older than that, they're when you get a bit older than 27 and you haven't had relationships, at that point you're in panic mode. But
Yep.
we're here to help all. Go ahead.
Sorry, we were talking about like how it's similar to fasting, right? And it's like being fasting an excessive period of time. You're not supposed to fast, and having food all around you, and someone's putting food sometimes, forcing food down your throat in a way, and you're saying that I'm fasting.
Yeah, so far the poll shows that 88% of people, most of them, Valentine's Day is something that's taught to them. As a child, what do you know what it is? I mean, as an adult right now, I wouldn't mind tax-paying money to indoctrinate my kids for fornication festivals. But as a child at that time, you don't know what's right or wrong. You're being taught by the environment you're in. For all we know, Valentine's Day in the future, if there's a boy that gives you a Valentine's Day card, are you supposed to say, I don't like boys? Is that going to be a bad thing to say in public? Even though in Islam, we have our own standards. Do we abide by other people's standards? We have our own path. The path that is supposed to give us to the path of the mighty and the praiseworthy. All other paths lead to destruction. So it's our duty to understand. We must help those that are younger than us. Help them and figure out what to do as a solution. When you're 15 years old, 16 years old, and you have these feelings and you understand that, okay, I have this emotion and I need to express it in some way, but I don't know what to do. You're in a conundrum. However, you have to also consider and be empathetic to those who are 40 years old and they have young children. Those who are born and raised here, a lot of those people who are born and raised here who are a bit older now that have young children, I can guarantee you a lot of them are thinking, how do I get my own child married? Because I see the problem that I had. I had to go run up Normandy Beach while Nazi pillboxers were shooting at me, and I was pulling out bullets with my bayonet from my leg. I don't want the same thing to happen to my kids. I have 4 kids. Can all of them get up to that beach? How can I get every one of them up that beach without getting shot at, without getting hurt, without getting damaged? It's going through their head consistently. And they think about these schooling systems that we have, and they think that, if in my schooling system they were indoctrinating fornication, what's going to happen by the time my kids go to this schooling system? Are they going to indoctrinate them on other things that have nothing to do with Islam? I mean, in terms of health class, when I was growing up, it was always about boys and girls. And nowadays, it seems like it's going to be more, unless, and I want to say it might not just be boys and girls. It might be boys and girls, boys and boys, and girls and girls. To what end will this type of indoctrination exist? We have to be very, very, very cautious, and we have to understand that we have our own path. However, we must figure out a way to learn that path. Everyone has a duty after the age of puberty to truly start delving into the Quran to understand what the Quran teaches. We're going to continue on to the verses. Tasir, do you have anything to say before we go?
There was a one point about puberty at marriage, but I think we'll hit that a little bit.
We'll wait a bit.
Deeper later.
A lot of you that are young, you hear information about, okay, you have to be physically mature before and mentally mature before you get married. There's a lot of communication about how this is supposed to happen. It's kind of ambiguous. You don't really understand what's happening. Now, There are verses in the Quran, we're going to go through them very, very lightly, but we're going to build for you a prototype of what the Quran recommends of how to handle these situations. We're going to teach you the tools. So that way, if somebody asks you a question, you can answer them. However, if you have something to say, you have something that backs you up. And we're going to go through articles and we're going to go through interviews. So we have one, the Book of Hazur, Garments for Each Other. Tafsir Bhatti can go through some of that. He's very good at remembering these things in verbatim compared to me. But also we're going to go through the article too. And what we're going to do is we're going to explore different items. However, let's start with this verse. O man, what has emboldened thee against thy gracious Lord? This is Surah 82, verse 7. And the next verse 8. Who created thee, then perfected thee, then proportioned thee right. You know, this verse in the long commentary talks about the Zaleen, the Christian, the ones who went astray, how they form their own philosophy and doctrines about how Allah Ta'ala has created man. And when we talk about what the age is for marriage, what the age is to find a wife, we're not, you can't compare yourself to this society's standards. We live in the society of Dajjal right now. There are institutions created to mislead people at very young ages. The things that occurred to me when I was young in terms of this society, the things that occurred to kids now are not even fathomable. You have to understand that in order to understand how we're supposed to progress as a people, we must focus on what these words mean in the Quran. When Allah Ta'ala says He created thee, the word that they use is al-Khaliq. Did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was saying that I think it's important to keep in mind, like, in order to, solve this problem, to progress, it's important not to follow the pathway that's laid down by society, as you were referring to the Zaleen, because that will not be successful. The Quran has to be followed, and the words in the Quran and the teachings in the Quran have to be followed, and they have to be that will lead to a solution, because otherwise it's just like you're reading one thing and kind of following the societal norms. It's not going to be fruitful.
Yeah, and you see this happen. I mean, how many Romans do you know of? How many Egyptians from the Pharaoh's era do you know of? All of them destroyed themselves. They were mighty people, but they didn't have the praiseworthy nature, and they destroyed themselves. The same way, if you want to become of that mighty people and the praiseworthy people, you follow the path that has been listed in the Quran. The word
the praiseworthy and mighty.
Yeah, so the word that's used here, who created thee, then perfected thee. The word created, al-Khalaq. To understand these words, you have to look at the Arabic. That word doesn't just mean a creator. It means a creator. And we understand that as a perfect creator that creates something with a plan. Nothing is created outside his exact specifications. That means if you're 15, 16 years old and you're having issues in which your brain wanders and thinks of unchaste thoughts and desires, the reason why this is happening is there's a disconnect on your ability to express your halal outlets and something that's holding you back. Now, what we have to understand is that when Allah Ta'ala creates something, He creates it with exact purpose in mind that He wills. Allah Ta'ala does not have a desire, He has a will. When He does something, it happens. So there's another verse that supports this and uses the same word creator in the sense of a planned creation. We have created you in pairs. Surah 78, verse 9. The attribute of al-Khalaq is used here as well. And what we have to really think about is that a lot of people think when they're 15, 16 years old that, I really need someone. And then they're told at that age. And you know what? I want to put up another poll, Zubair. How many of you, when you were younger, say 17, 18, expressed the desire to have that chaste relationship, but were pressured by outside sources, that to wait? I want to show other people this poll because we did this before. And a lot of people said, yes, frankly, it's the case. But we'll make it very, very general. And I'm going to continue. In that you're young and you have these desires. Why do we have them? A lot of people think that, okay, you need to wait, you need to be a little bit more mature. But the thing is that people right now have disconnected what it means to have that emotional and sexual desire with marriage. What will happen is they think that, okay, you're not really that experienced. How do you know you're going to find the right mate? They say these things thinking that they understand what it is to be a human being. When Allah Ta'ala Himself has created for you a system in which you would have almost a symbiotic relationship with another being, that relationship was designed, and it was designed by the mind of a perfect creator. If that relationship needs to exist, that means when you reach a certain age, there's a magnetism that develops in your heart to find that mate. that magnetism is not there out of some sort of futile creation. Allah Ta'ala does not create things haphazardly. He does not
creates with
create these.
purpose. Yeah.
Exactly. He creates with a purpose. So anything that points to a haphazard creation points to a flawed creator. And we do not believe that. We believe our creator is the most perfect creator. Did you want to say something before you continue?
Yeah, basically, this is still what I was saying before, that he doesn't create without purpose. Everything he creates is with a design and purpose. So
Did you want to
if
cite?
there's a
Go ahead.
if there's a desire, then there's a reason for that desire, and at a certain age.
Did you want to cite Hazur's guidance in the interview?
Referring to
Puberty.
Which part? All right, puberty. Okay.
This is from Review of Religions. We were reading. Actually, it's amazing. We were reading this recently, and there are two elements to marriage. One is the physical maturity and the mental maturity. And
yes.
we just want to read you the interview and the question and the answer Hazur had.
Yeah, so this was basically a Review of Religions article released 2 days ago. It was called True Love and the Perfect Life Partner. It was an interview between Hazur and Musafir Saab. So the question was, this is the question: Your Holiness, what is Islam's solution to the age before marriage when, for example, youth can have strong carnal desires? And Hazur replied, it is a natural law of nature, which we find even among animals, that when people reach an age of maturity, they think of forming physical relationships. Allah the Almighty has ordained an age of maturity or puberty. Islam teaches that instead of one indulging in indecency and immorality, marry at such an age. I think this is worth mentioning again. Allah the Almighty has ordained an age of maturity or puberty. Islam teaches that instead of one indulging in indecency and immorality, marry at such an age. We observe that in these societies, perhaps 70% of younger women or girls have already developed relationships with boys. Many issues arise as a result of this that lead to problems later. This is why Islam says to carry out the nikah, formal marriage in Islam, at an earlier age. Yet upon this, it is objected that we are promoting pedophilia.
Yeah, and that's really where it comes down to. We live in a society in which, they say that kids are too young to be in a relationship. However, they're not too young to be indoctrinated by outside sources to look at lewd content online. Nobody really cries wolf that why are kids being so, why is this such a prevalent issue that these kids at a very young age are exposed to lewd things online that rewire their basic neuronal patterns to have an inability to have a meaningful relationship. We'll go into that in detail, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about, Allah Ta'ala has created you with intention to have a mate. Now, of course, if you can't find one, you can't control the fact that you can't find one. But however, in this case, that's not the problem. The problem is that it seems like people are more a obstacle than anything else. And if you're a young boy, you're not really the obstacle. It seems like the environment around you is more problematic in this approach than your own opinions. Because if you take someone who's young and you introduce them to someone who's also young, they will have the desire to have a relationship. And if you combine that and then have that in a halal form, of course, anybody would do it. My own great grandparents, they got married at the age of 15. Why? Were they people that said, okay, we're going to die at the age of 30, so we're going to get married at the age of 15? No, because they lived till the age of 90. The reason, and people have this perception that the reason why people do it in the past, they flippantly say, is because they have low life expectancy. If you remove infant mortality, that's not the case.
Infant mortality after age 1.
They did it for the same reason why the Quran wants you to do it. It's to preserve chastity. That's the reason why we get married. People think that you get married to have kids. That's one reason. However, the Quran's supreme reasoning for marriage is to preserve chastity. Even the word marriage and chastity are intertwined. A lot of people think that chastity means that you remain basically a virgin. That's not what chastity means. Chastity means that when you express your desire for reproduction, you do it someone in a halal manner through nikah. Now, beyond this, we're going to go ahead.
Way of marrying later, like you were saying that your grandparents married at an earlier age, this way of marrying later may have been influenced by the Western society and perhaps British influence in that area.
Yeah.
So the thing is that, like, even if we we say that, okay, let's just follow these people, this is the way to do it. And everyone in the society marries late, and they do so and so before marriage, education, and they're stable. But the fact of the matter is that the people who do that in the Western society, a lot of them have extramarital affairs, meaning relationships outside of marriage before marriage. So it's not the same case for Ahmadis, or believers, you can say.
So this is where it's going to get a little bit more interesting. So now the 15-year-old is thinking, okay, I have these feelings and emotions, and they're confused. After a while, if they're not given the proper guidance, we have to understand there's different levels to this issue. The next level is, what are you doing in school? Like, for example, when you can't have a relationship with someone in a physical way because you're not married to them, at that point in time, people play games in their heads what they're allowed to do. So after the age of 15, let's raise the age, 16, 17, 18. Now, also another thing we have to understand is that when you're young, when you're 15 years old, the gap from 15 to 18 is almost a half a lifetime to you. And the gap from 18 to 25 is another half lifetime for you. But then the gap from 25 to 35 feels like a blink of an eye.
Yeah, time
As
speeds up when you get older.
Yeah, time does speed up when you get older. I'm about to be 33 now. And to me, I blink and that's when I was married 7 years ago. I don't even consider myself in a long-term relationship because in my head, I still think I'm 25 years old. In my personal situation, for example, the age of 15 to 18 was a very difficult time because I didn't have anyone there to depend upon. I didn't have anyone there to tell me about what was going to happen. I was literally Tom Hanks on the beach of Saving Private Ryan, looking around, seeing a bunch of people getting shot at because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what the society had entail for us. Our parents didn't even have an understanding what the internet was. They didn't have an understanding what was going to happen in the future in terms of relationships. However, us growing up here, we have an understanding that's much more intimate than those people. And we would like to help those who are younger than us. For example, for the 17-year-old, there's a verse here that's very applicable to them. Surah 24, verse 31. Say to the believing men, they restrain their eyes and guard their private parts. That is pure for them. Surely Allah is well aware of what they do. I said this very quickly, but this verse alone has so much detail in the verse. So to those of you who believe, restrain your eyes. That means when you're sitting in class and you have a girl that you understand you're attracted to, don't play the eye game with them. Where you're looking at them, they're looking at you, you look at them, they catch you looking at them, they look away, and then you catch them looking at you, you look away. That there is the first portal of interaction. You're basically creating in your brain a small location of consciousness for this person that grows over time. That's the first avenue of attack. The word here, guard their private parts. When I say that word, we have to understand that these words mean in Arabic are much, much vastly deeper than what we read in English. Those private parts, the farajun, refer to this as like an open field of entry. So if you can imagine outside a fortress, an open field in which there's any avenue to enter from, the mountains, the valleys, whatever it is. In our body, there are many different ways of entering: the eyes, the ears, the mouth. Speaking to someone, texting someone that's not your wife, talking to someone a little bit too much beyond the work you need to do that's not your wife, that's out of your mahram.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind, like you said, that it's talking about all open areas. So like I think listening to like the song of ladies' voices, I think Prophet Messiah mentioned something about that, and it can all be considered. There's like adultery of the mind, which I think we'll touch more upon later. So it's in regards of all the senses,
Yeah.
not just what your actual private parts. And also a little bit before that, there was this verse about chapter 78, verse 9. We've created you in pairs, and you know, basically it's part of Allah's attribute of the Al-Khaliq, is a creator, and He's created us with a purpose and a design, and any deviation from it will cause moral and physical deterioration.
And in this verse, verse 20, sort of 24, verse 31, it says, that is pure for them. We read these things and we think, because our human mind is just how limited we are, we kind of gloss over these things. Okay, that's pure for them. What does that actually mean? When you take a look at that word, pure, it's the same word that we use for zakat. And we have to understand that these words, purification, A lot of the Quranic examples that are used in the long commentary point to things that are much more vast in terms of knowledge, that are designed for people to understand, that are looking to build societies. That word pure basically is saying that if a relationship is farmland, what will happen is if you restrain yourself from going through these situations in which you poison your mate selection, your mate binding ability by getting into mental relationships with other people, not even physical. The fact that you're going after making yourself closer to people that you're attracted to, what will happen is that it will destroy your ability to have that meaningful relationship with one person. You have a lot of people who say that, how am I going to find a wife? How am I going to find someone compatible with me? The reason why they even know about the compatibility issue is because they've cataloged thousands of different personalities they've met outside. And they're trying to find that one personality that hits their niche of attraction that they found in their environment, whether it's their school or work. And they want to find that niche attraction. They want to match that. However, if you avoid that altogether, that will allow you to have that more pure form, that greater cultivation of crop. If you can imagine relationships like growing plants, the plant that grows out of your relationship with someone, when you attach yourself to someone at a young age, is much stronger. There's one point I want to get through that a lot of you probably don't understand, because whoever's not married wouldn't really understand this. But for women, with women, the first person that they emotionally attach themselves to, women themselves are very, very strong in terms of their emotional ties with their partners. And as women enter into the first relationship, the first person that they're attracted to, they become almost symbiotically emotionally attached to that person. Just like a piece of tape that you tape to a wall. At that point in time, that adhesive is very strong. However, if you tear that tape off and you try to reattach it again and again and again, that adhesive gets less and less and less. Same thing with relationships. This situation, what it'll do is, if you keep on going through the process of having that eye game with people and having that word game with people and the texting game with people and form these friendships outside your non-mahram, what you do is you destroy your ability to have that meaningful relationship with your future spouse.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, it reminds me of this I think a study I read a few years ago, in that, like, first of all, it was a question about whether or not females and males can be, friends. And basically in the poll, they said the majority of the participants responded that in order for us to solidify the friendship, some physical act had to be done, which implies that there is no real friendship between males and females. And another in the same, I think, article, there was another study about, like, the more partners you have prior to marriage, like, more dating partners you have, the less likely the marriage will last, because one is so used to a lack of commitment.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people think they have self-control when it comes to relationships. If you were an atheist and you believed in blind evolution, even you would agree that any eukaryotic organism, the most fundamental thing, before we even had a lot of the faculties we have as humans now, is the urge to reproduce. It is so conserved in our minds, in our bodies, in our genetics to reproduce, that urge itself is extremely strong. It's so strong. When people ask, why do girls get much better grades than guys? If you were someone who's designed to reproduce with someone, and you're sitting in a classroom and you're trying to learn, but at the same time, your 2 billion-year-old process of finding a mate is sitting right next to you, at that point in time, of course, you're going to be distracted. The point is that in these situations, when we're alone, when you're in college, by the way, we're progressing a little bit farther. You're not 17, you're 18 now, you're in college the first year. So you're playing eye games with a person across the room, and in your head, you're like, okay, as long as I'm not dating, this is fine. I'm not, as long as I remain a virgin, this is fine. That's not fine. It literally says right at the end of this verse, Allah is well aware of what they do. Even in private, even those eye games you play that nobody else notices except for you and that special person in your class, those things, Allah is completely aware of those things that occur. He's designed that type of mate attraction to be practiced in a specific way. However, when you abuse that practice, as it's being said here, when you're not restraining your eyes, what you're doing is you're hurting your ability to have that meaningful relationship. So when somebody comes to you when you're 19, 20 years old and says, I want to find a wife for you, you say, hold up, wait a minute, let me get my mental catalog. Okay, chapter 5, let's see, section 4, she got to have exactly these eyes, these hair, these are the credentials she needs, because according to my catalog of what hit the bell up here, this is what I've cataloged for myself. You nearly shoot yourself in the leg when you do this, because when you try to have a relationship later on, it's very difficult.
Yeah, even though the catalog is kind of artificial, because it's not really based on First of all, it's even if it's real, it's things that don't really matter. And when the relationship actually develops, and usually it's just artificial features because they're, it's a lot of things are not real. They're just what you perceive them to be.
Yeah. And the thing is that as you grow up, you have to understand that when you violate these laws, you're going to go through traps. Like they're landmines on the beach. Let's just put it like that. And the first landmine on the beach you have to understand is that when you're looking at females, literally, by the way, the verse after this, I think after this, talks about how females should interact with males. And it speaks about them not revealing themselves. Zubair, if you can pull up the verse right after this one for what females should do, that'd be helpful. And I want you to read it off when we're done. So the reason why I bring this up is that you're in your catalog of what females are, you're cataloging those pieces of information when you're not in with them for let's just say an extended period. It's their best appearance you're seeing that they do in public, and some of those females that are used to males looking at them, they will specifically manipulate their bodies in order to attract other males. Because what will happen is that with those females, when the first level of attraction occurs in which they find someone that they like, say when they're 12, 13 years old, and that tape is ripped off because Johnny liked another girl, so Jessica has some sort of validation problem. What will occur is that when you take a look at Jessica, she's wearing the exact makeup and she has the exact pose that she knows that guys like. And what will happen is that exact information gets implanted up here. So when you go for rishta, you're basing your rishta off of situations that have occurred in an artificial realm, not even real. And then what will happen is if you don't have sisters and you don't understand what females look like without makeup, what will slowly occur is that apocalypse, the veil lifting of what they actually are, occurs later on. This is why dating doesn't work. You see your best information of what that person's like, and you are already infatuated in the situation, so you can't really even understand what's occurring. So what will happen is that after a while, all of the things that were hidden become apparent. And then the real person comes out. And at that point in time, you're dumbfounded and you're thinking, wait a minute. I was attracted to this person, but now I absolutely hate this person because what they look like and what they act like is not at all what I was into. These catalogs people create in their brains that I need this specific person with this specific height, build, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why these catalogs exist is because they violated this. And even when you're young, when you're very young, say when you're 15 years old, your personality, your expectations are like wet cement. And when two blobs of wet cement come together, they can mold very well together and they can form one brick very easily. But when you get older, that wet cement starts drying. And when you try to get two stones and you have to pulverize everything about those stones. You have to destroy your entire identity in order to properly mold with someone else after that age. So imagine go ahead.
They're they're like two rocks, and it's like when you're younger, you mold one into another, and when you get older, it's like harder to change your ways if people are set in their ways.
So we're going to go through 10 more minutes, and then we're going to take a break for about 15 or 30 minutes.
What do you want to 30.
Do? 30? Okay, we'll do 30 minutes after that. But
and what you were saying before about the artificial like features that are so nice in the beginning, they become, basically you stop seeing the good features, start seeing the bad features because of the personality. Like that light goes away.
Yeah.
And because was never really real to begin with.
Now,
if it was real, it was never, those things, the personality is something that lasts, not those physical features.
And now let's take the next step. Okay, say you're 20 years old, right? You're midway through college, or say you're 22, you're done college. And at that point in time, you have been playing the eye game enough that you've developed an emotional bond without your own. I mean, if you didn't know, it's a situation where you're going to fall victim to things you don't know. But at the same time, you were told where to get information from. But say if you were playing this emotional bonding game with someone for this many years, at that point in time, Allah Ta'ala tells you how you're supposed to approach the prospect of finding a mate. And it literally says, by the way, before we do this, Zubair, do you want to go through the verse with the females and how they're supposed to present themselves? You can just read the English.
This is after the verse of believing men, so I'll read that one first. To say to the believing men that they restrain their eyes and guard their private parts, that is pure for them. Surely Allah is well aware of what they do. And the next verse is, and say to the believing women that they restrain their eyes and guard their private parts, and that they disclose not their natural and artificial beauty, except that which is apparent thereof, and that they draw their head covering over their bosoms, and that they disclose not their beauty, save their husbands or their fathers or the fathers of their husbands, or the sons, or their sons, or the sons of their husbands, or their brothers, or the sons of their brothers, or the sons of their sisters, or their women, or what their right hands possess, or such of male attendants as have no sexual appetite, or young children who have no knowledge of the hidden parts of a woman. And they strike not their feet, so that what they hide of their ornaments may become known. And turn ye to Allah altogether, O believers, that you may succeed.
So we understand that Allah wants for the men to restrain their eyes and guard their private parts, and He also wants for the women to prevent themselves from seeking that cycle of validation in which they show themselves so that they can be validated by other men, which does occur when you have a situation when a female loses the sense of modesty and chastity. The next step, say you're 20, 22 years old, you're in college, and you found someone, and we're gonna assume that when people do these things, they're trying to do them because they think that they're going through the process of finding a proper mate. They're like, I can't find someone, but however, I think this person's a very righteous person, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find a halal way to marry this person, whether it's to convert them or to marry them as they are. However, there's a fundamental, extremely fundamental flawed situation, and we're going to go through because I don't believe that can happen in this day and age the same way it happened in the past, and I will go through why. So it's verse 6 of Surah 5. So Surah 5 verse 6. This day all good things have been made lawful for you, and the food of the people of the book is lawful for you, and your food is lawful for them. And lawful for you are chaste, believing women, and chaste women from among those who are given the book before you. When you give them their dowries, contracting valid marriage, and not committing fornication nor taking secret parameters. And whoever rejects the faith, his work has doubtless come to naught, and in the hereafter he will become among the losers.
It's very strong.
This is we'll go through as much as we can for now, but so first things first, when you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, I need a mate and I couldn't get one when I was 15, and I don't see any prospect of me finding one in the future because I am not rich enough for someone to marry me at this point. So in this situation, I am going to mentally do gymnastics and find someone that I think will be my appropriate mate from the situation I'm in now. Say it's school, say it's work, whatever it is. First things first, chaste, believing women, muhsanat. Muhsanat, muhsin, mohsin, these all point towards a form of protection, of fortress. It almost means a fortress of chastity in the sense that marriage, nikah, is the contract, but also marriage is an institution, a fortress of chastity. This doesn't describe a behavior as much as it describes a way of life. And the way of life it describes is that when somebody has these feelings and emotions, that they guard them and they express them in a halal outlet. So Allah Ta'ala is telling you, I want you to basically find a situation in which you express these things in an outlet that is halal. So marriage. So muhsanat for a woman, say 200 years ago, is that by the time they reach the age of puberty, there were plans put together to get this marriage done before they have that emotional attachment with anyone else. Because that emotional attachment should happen with their husbands, and it should be the first emotional attachment that occurs. That's a beautiful marriage. However, in this case, it goes into detail about how you can have this chaste, believing women type of relationship, and how to have this relationship with women before too.
So like
Now,
it's
go ahead.
yeah, it's saying like it's not just about having a marriage, but it's a marriage that maintains chastity throughout. That's this word mosanat, and
Yeah.
it's interesting that it shares the same root as the word mosin, which is like a higher spiritual stage, and it kind of implies that in order to be a mosin, we can clarify with Murabi Sab later,
Yeah.
but that you have to be
That's true.
chaste.
Yeah, I was going to say that's true. So for a lot of this, we're going to do a little bit more analysis in Rabbi Sub to see if there's anything we missed, because we can only do the long commentary because I'm not really a professor of this, and nor is Tasir Bhakti here. So we're just going off of what we see in the Jamaat literature. However, what's really interesting is that a muhsin, somebody who's a muhsanati, what they're doing is they're directing their desire for mate bonding towards a protected target. So when you're in Normandy and you're running up that beach, what you're doing is that if you want to commit your action without having a problem, say German MG42s are shooting at you, what a muhsin is a person who's almost in this fortress. and the farjun, the outside influences that people can enter in from, those are protected by this fortress. And the guard who guards farjun, guards the what's it called, private parts, they're the guard that's sitting inside this fortress. So for a person who's in this type of situation in which they're trying to express the desire for reproduction in a halal way, they would do it in a situation that would be through marriage. Now the thing is this, is that when you're sitting in class and you're playing the eye games, that's not that's against this process, because what you're doing is you're violating one of the factors. So let's go through the factors. One is it has to be chaste believing, right? Our people of this book are the previous books that were revealed by God. However, you're contracting valid marriage. What that means is that in terms of the idea of how to handle this, before you have physical contact, there has to be nikah. On top of that, you're not committing zina. I mean, there's no type of physical contact that involves some sort of sensual exchange, whether it's, seeing something, talking about something, whatever could be involved, because zina can be many avenues. That means you can't fantasize about them up here. These things have to be completely avoided. Zina of the mind, zina of the ears, zina of the every avenue of attack that zina can occur through, you do not do that.
Should I say that excerpt from Azur's article now?
Go ahead.
Okay, so regarding zina of the mind, the question from that same Review of Religions article was, Your Holiness, we've been asked this question in the past about the view on people who perform acts on themselves like masturbation for pleasure, which has been connected with pornography and is rampant in society. What is Islam's take on this? And Azur replied, generally, information on medical websites today often states that to perform this act may increase a man's ability to or strength, or that it makes no difference. However, physicians of previous times would say otherwise, and that it causes weakness, and this in fact is the reality. People who perform this act suffer because when they then try to perform naturally, they are unable to do so as they lack any desire, that's one consequence, or they have premature ejaculation, which is a second consequence. Secondly, ask anyone who does this act and they will tell you they will be imagining someone else whilst carrying out masturbation. They have to fantasize about another person during this act to incite their desire. This is why the Prophet ﷺ has spoken of the adultery of the mind. This is when a person fantasizes about someone else who they can never have access to, and therefore the only way to further that desire is to fantasize even more. This is adultery of the mind, and this is why Islam has forbidden us from indulging in such immoralities and indecent acts. So, it has health effects. And also, it's basically, even if it's if you're not having that physical act, you're imagining a real person and in one's mind.
Yeah. And the thing is that, say if you haven't done that, the next step is secret paramour. Now people don't really understand what that is, and people kind of avoid going through, because these words have to be, every iota of the Quran has to be taken with a heavy understanding. That secret paramour is talking about the type of relationship you have where you form that friendship, that bond, the amorous bond you form without the wali or anyone understanding what's happening. So in this situation, when you're sitting in class or you're at work and you find someone you're attracted to, and at that point in time, you start playing the eye games and it becomes an emotional attachment without any physical contact. At that point in time, you're violating the situation, because if they understand and you understand, there's some sort of connection there, and you start speaking about the situation in which you desire them or they desire you, and there's some sort of planning that occurs with the wali present. Guess what? That's outside the pale of Islam. Now, there is actually a caveat here before we go to the next part. In Islam and in Judaism, it's against both religions, and we're going to specify this through Murabbi Sahib. It's against both religions for a wali to give off their daughter to someone outside the religion. So if you were to marry someone of the believing people, we have to figure out exactly what scenario would allow someone to give their daughter off to someone they think is a heathen. In this situation, if you find someone at work and they happen to be somebody who's Christian, which we as Ahmadi believes are Messianic Jews, so they follow the same law of the Torah. And at that point in time, if you want to do it the most halal way, you would approach their wali. So you'd find out, God knows how, where their dad lives, their information, and you'd approach the wali and say, I want to marry your daughter. At that point in time, if he is a practicing Jew, at that point in time, he's like, you're basically outside of my religion. There's nothing I can do at this point. Now we're going to see exactly how this occurs, but even in this day and age, it's unfathomable. I don't understand how it happens now, in which someone can go and find someone and say, "Hey, look, let's start this relationship without an emotional attachment beforehand." And that emotional attachment, that secret paramour, those things are denied in Islam. Islam does not want you to have a situation in which you're trying to emotionally attach yourself with someone before you get married to them. Because what happens if that person is not married to you and they have to find another mate? At that point in time, the baggage they have in their hearts of the relationship they had with you, even in their mind, damages them. As we've seen before, the restraining of the eyes, this is more pure for you. So in this case, we want to avoid that at all costs. And these words that are said after this, and whoever rejects the faith, his work has become doubtless come to naught, and in the hereafter he will become among the losers. Say you go through all the avenues, and to everyone else it looks like you've taken the halal approach, but you in your heart knew you've done something haram. At that point in time, there is no halal way to do something haram with a halal end. You
And
can't go
that's
through this.
important,
Go ahead.
There's no right way to do the wrong thing. The ends does not justify a corrupted means.
Yeah.
The right end, the right objective cannot be done through an incorrect way.
So in your mind, if you're doing all these wrong things, but you're like, "Oh, I'll get a nakah before we do anything serious," at that point in time, it's still something wrong. And through all these things, the secret paramour, the fornication, the nakah that's required, if you ignore these, the next clause comes into effect. The next clause being, whoever rejects the faith. Iman, belief, faith, also it refers to a security, a peaceful state of mind, something that secures you from the dangers of this world, the dangers of being that type of disbeliever, the dangers of shaitan. You have forfeit your ability to become protected from these things. And what will occur is that your work here in this life, even though you think that maybe I'll be better off financially, it doesn't matter. It'll become dust. Just like the things that occurred before. The Pharaoh, the Romans, all dust. It's all destroyed. Everything's gone. In terms of the Soviet Union, dust. In terms of other things that are occurring, dust. What will occur then is that also the work you did for the hereafter, you'll become of the losers. You won't become of the winners. This pathway you indulge yourself in will destroy what you have now and in the future.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, like, and if someone works towards some material means, like if they're trying to earn money, because the law of nature, if they work hard, they may get it. But when the person passes away, they can't, take this material world with them. They take their deeds with them.
So at usually at the age of 22, for me it was 22, and when which because before we end, I'm going to do a little empathetic connection here. When I was growing up, I didn't have an understanding of when I needed to get married. In my head, I thought I was 27. I was like, 27, that's a good age. And I was 15, like 27 sounds fine. That's like getting off of the boat on, Normandy, be like, I'm going to run up this beach and it'll be cakewalk. It's like almost like the expectation of those who went into World War I after the Civil War, thought it was going to be a picnic and came back like it was going to be hunky-dory. But what happened was when they were introduced to it, they came back without limbs, mustard gas defects on their face, and wives taking pictures of their husband's coast because their husbands all died. The situation was that it was so horrendous in terms of having the desire to have a mate but not having it fulfilled, that not only does it destroy you physically, it will destroy you emotionally as well. So for me, that was the breaking point, 22, in which I've thought, what am I waiting for? I've lived almost in my head an entire lifetime. And what am I suffering for? What am I here? What is the pain? What is the purpose of this pain? And at that point in time, that's when the switch occurred, in which I was like, okay, let me find a path. And what we're going to do is when we come back from break, we're going to show you the path that was created in the Quran. And for those of you who are young who say that I don't have a situation in which I can find someone, we're going to help you out. And for those of you who are older that are trying to find someone to get their daughters married off to, we're going to have a situation for you too. We're going to have a solution for both ends. We're going to reconcile both ends, and we're going to allow people to understand the proper path. Before we end, we have to understand that when problems are created, when situations occur, there's always solutions that are devised by Allah Ta'ala to create a remedy for this problem. In this specific situation for Rishta, we have a system. And what we're going to do, Zubair, what we're going to do is this. I want you to create a poll and put out some names of who created the Rishta Nata system. All right? And we're going to see what people vote on. And then half an hour, we're going to come back and take a look. Let's take a look. Did we talk about the previous poll?
So yeah, what you were saying before about it's hard to at that age it's hard to you're kind of having a hard time emotionally, physically, and I think it's important to note that it's hard to deal with other problems in your life too when you don't have that close support sometimes it's when you're married, it's easier to, and then people kind of get stuck in a rut. And even though they're all believers, we're all but it's just that having that support. You have this problem, then you have another problem in your life, and you're not married, so it's kind of one after the other.
So what we're going to talk about when we come back is we're going to talk about, solution. Also, we're going to talk a little bit more about problems. Like, for example, when I ran up the beach to get to my age and, pulling the bullets out of my legs, as I look back, these kids have such worse things that are trying to indoctrinate them. They have computer learning that are trying to destroy their ability to sexually thrive. I mean, pornography is so advanced now that they data mine the people who look at it so they can figure out exactly what you can do to create that situation of perpetual auto stimulation. It's so much so that kids at age of 10 are indoctrinated, and by the time they're age of 15, there's so much self-sexual abuse, they're incapable of having a physical relationship. We're going to go into detail about these things. We're going to explain why these kids are almost being winged at a young age, where they can't eat. For now, people talk in hush-hush tones about dating being an issue. In the future, the way things are going now, dating will be almost not even considered as bad as the situations that are occurring right now. Kids can't even have physical and emotional relationships because of the situations of what they see online. Adults who are married, yeah, that's what I was referring to in real religion. Adults, because of these situations of what they see online, are not having meaningful relationships with their wives because they destroy the natural cycle that Allah Ta'ala has created to have intimate relationships with your other spouse. We're going to talk about these things in detail, and we're going to go into detail to figure out the solutions to these problems. The next step for this episode after today, because we're going to break for about half an hour, will be to go into detail about the Quranic verses and what these words mean, in detail about other things outside the long commentary, because any of us here can read the long commentary, but we really want to know what other Jamaat literature shows. All right, so we're going to stop now. Naji, are you there?
What time
Do you have anything to say this year?
What time are we going to meet back? In about like 8:40 or 8:35?
Let's do 8:35.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. So Jazakallah guys for the amazing session so far, alhamdulillah. As has been mentioned earlier in the comment section too, I also wasn't really sure what we were walking into today, but alhamdulillah, I've been glued to the screen so far, so you guys are doing alhamdulillah a great job. So in regards to the next half an hour, it's our request to everyone that you use this next half an hour to offer your Maghrib Salat, and then join right back in. We'll leave the call active in that time period. So I request the presenters to turn off their videos throughout this break time. And so the call will still be on at that time. You don't have to log out. You can log out and come back as well. Either way is fine. So inshallah, we'll meet again. I think 8:40 is better just to give people the proper time to offer Maghrib Salat. That gives about half an hour exactly. So inshallah, we'll meet back at 8:40 and start the session again. So inshallah, see everybody then. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, I guess I'll recite the English. I don't think you can hear me. And come not near unto adultery. Surely it's a foul thing and an evil way. Now, so we discussed a story before, specifically with somebody who's growing up here, that their interaction with women in class, their interaction with women at work, at school, those who try to find someone to marry but use the unchaste method of doing so. How eventually it's a waste, because in the end, you must believe in all of the iman to benefit and get the reap the rewards from it. However, once we're up the beach and the Nazi pillboxes are destroyed and we're looking back, the things I see to the generation, the youth that's happening now, for example, the lewd things you see online growing up, they weren't as bad as they are now. And this verse, and come not near unto adultery, is trying to shut off all avenues that lead to zina of the mind, zina of the body, whatever items attack the farjun. It wants to avoid any of that, close off any avenue. And also it says, surely it's a foul thing and an evil way. Foul in that it's immodest, it's disgusting, but also an evil way. One, it's disgusting, but also it leads you to a path of destruction. We released a poll before we did this session in which we asked people if their parents had an idea of the things that is happening to kids nowadays. And a lot of parents, they think they know, but they in fact don't know. And a lot of them are oblivious, according to the poll, at least. And what we realized was that specifically with lewd content online, when we were growing up, it wasn't really fully realized. And now it's beyond fathomable. People don't even understand. For example, like kids that are 15 years old don't even understand why this type of like content you see online is damaging. To them, they think it's as simple and as normalized as going to the fridge to get something to eat. So for them, they feel like this is just a release for desire, and this is the way we do it. This is normal. 10, 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't normal. 40 years ago, if you said to someone that someone is doing something where they're looking up this online on the internet, they would think that person's a fringe person, not normal at all. And then after, multiple years of people getting into this, it's become more and more and more ingrained to our society. And, as a United States citizen, I understand that, this country is beautiful, that we have the freedom to do what we want. And also that includes the freedom to believe what we want, because we believe as Muslims that we're on the right path. However, I would never want someone else to enforce their belief on me. Definitely would never want that to happen. But at the same time, that allows people to destroy themselves too. And in this case, I've seen what this does to people. This type of content, what it does, it destroys people's ability to even have relationships. Imagine 20 years ago, people are struggling to find dates and they go into like eHarmony, or 10 years ago, you go into eHarmony and they try to find a mate to have. And now people have distilled that down all just to find someone that's near you to express your physical desire with. That's right now. And right now, the kids that are on the beach right now are being slaughtered by new machines that people don't even fathom. Imagine these websites that exist that people go to, they data mine people. And they basically create exactly what's desired to create that illicit response that allows auto-stimulation to be possible. The thing that Hazur mentioned, the thinking in the mind of these things, that the fantasies that occur. And what occurs is that this child who's been an organism that has evolved with not as many women as they see online, maybe 2,000-3,000 years ago, you'd see only a handful of women. But now your brain, which is still developed from that time so long ago, you're seeing thousands and thousands of images. And what occurs is you create basically a catalog of whatever it can create the autosomal response. Your brain desires something, and your body has to create that type of physical stimulation to create that heightened feeling. And what occurs over time is that you have kids that are developed now, that say you're 15 years old, 16 years, say most of them get exposed in elementary school. However, until 25, your brain is still neuroplastic. It can still create, vastly new pathways in thinking. And what will happen is at this very, very small impressionable age, their brain creates a pathway that says that if I need a sexual desire to be released, this is the button I hit to release it. And what occurs, the fundamental problem is that as time progresses, this type of situation will create someone who has in their brain a specific type of response that they need. They need to look at something very, very specific to elicit that same response. And it won't always occur. Because what will happen is that you'll need something more and more, because your autosomal system, your autonomic system requires some sort of stimulus that's a physical stimulus to go ahead and, you know, perform the act. And what will
Yeah.
occur over time is you'll see these kids before, when people dated and, you know, people were promiscuous in the 60s and 70s, those people grew up in that era that have destroyed their body's ability to have a relationship. They have to take medication in order to even physically do the act of copulation. And now what you'll see is kids are growing up now and they're having difficulties even having any type of sensual relationship with their partner at the age of 20. And eventually what's occurring is that these kids are developing into the point in which they can't even have emotional and physical attachments with their spouses or their girlfriends. They're
Yeah, I
destroying
think.
themselves almost. So did you
Yeah.
want to say something?
Yeah, I was saying that I think this is an important point. Like basically, this lewd content online, what we're referring to as pornography, um, basically separates the act and the relationship, the emotional, like the actual desire with the actual capacity to perform. And that's also something he was referring to that in his article as well in Review of Religions. And also the auto stimulation, just for future references, referring to basically masturbation.
So what will happen is that you have kids that are growing up now, and basically they are deassociating marriage with the act of basically being with a woman. And what they'll do is that, if I need to be with someone, I'll do it, and I'll realize this. And these are non-Muslims mainly. This desire with these people online. And what I'll do is, if I need a relationship, if I need a emotional relationship, I'll date someone for multiple years, and we'll get to know each other. That's actually an old concept. What's developing now, and if you look at as a person who's rush up the beach looking back, what's happening to these kids now is that their brains are being manipulated into becoming addicted to these things at a young age. Now, people say that it's not addictive. They say scientifically it's not addictive. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, perhaps right now there's not a research that shows it. Maybe in the future it shows something. However, it's destructive. That's one thing I do know definitely. And what these companies do is they desire that people get addicted to these things. That's why they put out promotional materials. I'm being told by young kids left and right that they're trying to put up promotional materials to get in, basically entrap people into this. And what occurs is the reason they do this is because they know that if they can implant themselves into the consciousness of a person and create that habit at a young age, that person will be unable to fulfill their desires with another female. The worst thing for these companies, for these type of like organizations, is that people live chaste lives because they won't make a dime. They won't make any money whatsoever. But if they can entrap someone at a young and impressionable age and make them physically dependent upon this to elicit that response that they require, the auto stimulation they require, they have a slave that they have for the entire life. Even if you get married, your spouse, your wife won't be able to fulfill that same desire because you've destroyed your brain's ability to recognize what it is to be in that physical emotional bond. You've separated the two, because in a relationship, it's not just the physical attribute, it's the emotional attribute, it's a tenderness, it's the personalities, it's everything that's required to remain in that type of emotional attachment with another person. It evolves over time, it changes over time. And right now, today, we have a situation in which they data mine people and they manipulate people. In the future, God knows what's going to happen. For all we know, we have systems that can analyze our biometrics, figure out exactly what makes us tick, and reveal to us content that's exact right content that's basically there to keep us as slaves.
Yeah, basically both lewd content online as well as dating, it's like a big business. Like people make lots of money off it, like having multiple relationships, always trying to, buy gifts, please each other, or please the female, and as well as the lewd content online, always paying fees. Whereas, like you said, having a chaste relationship, there would be a lot of loss of business.
You have kids that
And
are growing up now, and go ahead, were you going to say something?
basically, it's like you're entrapped in some kind of like shackles.
You have kids growing up now, and basically what's occurring is that their brains are being developed one way, and they're being manipulated and being developed this way. And what will occur is that they have normalized this. If you talk to somebody who's in high school right now that's non-Muslim, they've normalized this. They've normalized it so much so that it's almost like the book Brave New World, where they're just going around fulfilling that desire. And the kids right now, like dating, I honestly think dating is obsolete at this point. Tinder, these things that exist right now, for those of you who don't know, Tinder's an app just like Uber Eats. You find someone you like that's desirable, you match to them, they match to you, and 3 seconds later they're at your doorstep. Nothing required, no courtship, nothing, no emotional attachment, just a physical interaction. This is what this society has become now. Can you imagine 50 years from now? Can you imagine if we have the capability of creating virtual environments when people can see whatever they want? Can you imagine if those virtual environments could become physical entities? Imagine how damaging. Right now, we have a problem in which young people have an issue with vaping. And for things that are illegal, they try to expose them to things like caffeine at a very young age just to get them addicted. Can you imagine a company that if we legalize things like prostitution, what would occur? You'd have companies that produce androids and try to go after people at a young age. If they could, they would. Even when virtual reality came out, these lewd things became prevalent on there. And what's occurring now is you're having boys that are growing up that don't even have a concept of a relationship. They can't hold a physical interaction with someone. They can't even have that type of emotional attachment with someone anymore. It's impossible. And you see countries like Japan in which you have entire populations of young men that can't even have a relationship. They have a relationship with virtual items. And they have to produce products, physical products, to create that auto stimulation to allow them to feel the same emotion and feeling that they require to reach that same height. This is the reason why things like pedophilia and these disgusting things exist, because what will happen is that the body is not designed to specifically you hit the button with an infinite catalog of what's it called, subjects. The body itself can only have so much. People think about, like, for example, traumatic experiences, and it's all mental. It does have a physical toll. Same thing with this. It has a physical toll. There's a natural process, and if that natural process is hijacked by physical abuse, what occurs is that natural process and the mental requirement start diverging, and that's when you have people that will want to be with someone but they physically can't perform anymore. It destroys their entire ability. So now, I mean, we've gone into this subject, and what I want to go into is I want to go into a little bit about the solution and the process for it too. Zubair, if you can, I don't know if you can you unmute yourself? I think you're with, give me a second. There we go, he unmuted. Can you do verse 20, Surah 24, verse 33?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تقربوا الزنا إنه كان فاحشة وساء سبيلا. And come not near unto adultery, surely it is a foul thing and an evil way.
That's 1733. That's one we just did. And it's funny because Farjun, I think, is mentioned. Is Farjun in that verse too? Can you look at the Arabic? Okay, so we'll go back, but let's look at 2433. That's what I want you to read.
وَإِنكِحُوا الْأَيَامَ مِنكُمْ وَالصَّالِحِينَ مِنْ عِبَادِكُمْ وَإِمَائِكُمْ إِن يَكُونُوا فُقَرَاءَ يُغْنِهِمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And marry widows from among you, and your male slaves and female slaves who are fit for marriage. If they be poor, Allah will grant them means out of His bounty, and Allah is bountiful, all-knowing.
Thank you very much. So basically, for this situation, we've been discussing a lot of the problems. We've been discussing what's on the beach, what's going to kill you on the beach, what's going to drag you back on the beach, what's going to drown you before you get to the boat. The Nazis shooting you, the Nazis blowing you up, whatever things destroy you. But now we're going to show you the process and how to actually fight back on this. First things first, we have to understand that the Quran itself is not a book of abstinence in terms of celibacy. It's a book of allowing you to express your desires in a halal way. This concept of preventing yourself to have physical relationships because somehow that's a holier method. The Quran doesn't have room for celibacy. The way Allah Ta'ala has designed us, He's designed us to have a physical manifestation after the age of puberty that allows us to have a relationship with someone. Now, we can't control when we have puberty. We can't control when we become physically developed and we have these emotions. However, we can modulate and we can help control when our children grow mentally mature by testing them. Now, in this situation, for specifically in this verse, we're going to discuss how this helps you. Who are those people who are young? Because you have questions and you have people who give you answers based upon information that may not be full information that basically points towards specific situations in which it may take one part of the Quran, but it rejects another. We want to look at the Quran as a whole. And as we've discussed so far, the Quran does not want you to even go even near adultery, all the avenues that lead to it. We don't want to play the eye games with the girl next to you at math class. We don't want to have, let's say, too much of an intimate conversation with coworkers at work. There's a certain level we have to keep, and we have to protect that, because we know that in our heads, we can have a perception and we can let other people perceive that we're doing the right thing, but we know in our hearts what we're doing. Allah Ta'ala knows what we're doing too. So we need to make sure that we can protect that. We have to be practical about this. So in this verse, the first item, and marry widows from among you, it's very important to read the Arabic. That word, ayuman, the plural of ayuman, means those who are unmarried, virgin or non-virgin. The Quran views, this is directly from the long comment, the Quran views with extreme disfavor the unmarried state. The married state is categorized as the normal state.
The married state is the normal state.
Now, Tasir, I have to ask you a question. When someone considered somebody who's a marriageable virgin?
When?
Yeah. Biologically.
At the age of maturity.
Puberty, right?
Puberty, yeah.
Yeah. And Hazur has mentioned this. These feelings we
article, yeah.
have. Now, the thing is, let's talk about this. You know, right now, a lot of people are thinking, like, how the heck are we going to get married at the age of 15 of the year 2020? What we're saying is we're not encouraging someone specifically in all cases to get married at this age. What we're saying is that this is what the Quran is pushing us towards. And it's our goal that if I look behind me on the beach, I want to shorten that beach as much as I can. I want to get you into the fortress of chastity. I don't want you to stand out there taking arrows, taking gunfire, taking whatever's out there, the battlefield, for too long, because I know you'll be damaged. And I want as many of you to get to the end of that beach as possible. That's what our job is here. And what this says first, it says that basically it's commanding us as believers to marry those among you who are unmarried, even widows, all of them. Don't abandon them. Beyond that, it says your male slaves and female slaves who are fit for marriage, even those of the disenfranchised class. Don't allow people to walk around unmarried, because that facilitates an environment of destruction. If they be poor, Allah will grant them the means of his bounty. For those of you who say, you're a kid who makes no money whatsoever, that's not for them to worry about. That is not for them to worry. That's not what we're focusing on. You should be focusing on the chastity, to preserve the chastity, not about what's in the coffers. God knows in the past 100 years, people who worried about money, World War I, World War II, and possibly World War III in the future. Right now, we're in a situation where the world's falling apart right now. The point is that money is very temporary. Money can come and go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to read this excerpt from that. It's from Garments for Each Other. Basically, it's a Friday sermon delivered. And the quote is, those who are, from Hazur's Friday sermon, those who are poor should not despair either. This is a commandment of marriage. These days, we do not have slaves. However, in many poor countries, people do not have the means to marry. The Jamaat and some individuals all do help in this regard. So Allah Almighty says that do not think that they cannot marry because of poverty. If a man does not work, is unemployed, or has no means of earning, his marriage should still be arranged, and the Jamaat has a system for helping such people, as it should. So usually, except in a few cases when this help is given, they realize that now they are married and have a family to support, they have to try to find some work, business, or employment. Under the wife's pressure, he is more inclined to find a job. There are many examples of poor people whose circumstances improved after marriage. So it not only says that, poverty should not be a barrier, but people do become more mature after marriage. And this is from the Friday sermon, December 24, 2004.
Yeah, and the end of this verse is, and Allah is bountiful, all-knowing. So he knows everything that's occurring. Allah knows all information. There's nothing hidden from him. The reason he reveals these verses is because he knows our society better than we do. He knows what's best for us. He knows that if we have basically a situation in which people are walking around unmarried, it's going to cause problems. Like it's causing problems right now. You can take a look at societies, even Germany after World War II. The preponderance of women unmarried, a lot of them resorted to prostitution. The real problem here is that people have separated what the concept of marriage is from what their life goals are. Their life goals have become one thing and the concept of marriage has become another. And they think that maybe if I do my life goals, this concept of marriage is just a keystone for my life. It's not really that important. It's not even part of my development. However, the Quran is saying, literally says that we created you with a specific purpose and specific build. And when you have puberty, when Allah Ta'ala creates this emotion in you, it's not created out of some sort of vain desire. Allah Ta'ala wills things in existence. This desire was created in our hearts because at that time, that's what Allah Ta'ala has created, a natural propensity for people to go out and seek a mate. However, we've shot ourselves in the foot because we've made these people who are 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds into small children. Even 18, a lot of people think is too young. They think the person's too young. They're still an adult. They're legally an adult. You know, beyond this, we have to understand that, and we did the poll for who created the Shanata system, and let me take a look to see what the answers were so far. So 6 out of 10 of you correctly answered. Now, I just want to give you an understanding. Imagine you're running up that beach, and imagine if a half track is next to you. Half track is basically, it's an armored vehicle. And you, as you understand, this armored vehicle is bulletproof from the hail of gunfire in front of you. Practically what happens when you ignore assistance is you're saying, no, I'm not going to enter into the armored vehicle. I'm going to run up the beach myself. And if you get shot a few times, you have only yourself to blame. When things are created, they're created for a purpose. When a prophet creates something, can you imagine if you see the ark being built in front of you, you're like, I don't need the ark. I can build my own boat. At that point in time, you're being ungrateful. We have a system created years before eHarmony and these other systems, something completely space age at that point in time, a system to basically facilitate marriage for people who are unmarried. And at this point in time, the best solution we have to get up that beach is to make sure we facilitate the usage of this system. And if we ignore this system, go ahead.
I think it was an important point. You said, not using the means that you have, or like if you have a certain talent or a certain solution, you're not using it. It in a way it does show ungratefulness, because it's like something that was bestowed to you or given to you by God, Allah, and you're not using it, and for example, if something's, you have a certain talent or a certain thing to you can do something a certain way, and you're not using it, just kind of like holding back. I think it shows that you're not using the talent that was given to you or the resource that was given to you. So in a way, it's like a little bit of ungratefulness.
Yeah. And what's occurring now is that you have people that see this system as it's not for them. And you have to understand that, okay, so if we believe in God and we believe that God sends messengers and a messenger creates something, we're not going to use it. Then if there's a fault, it's not with the system that was created. It's with the people who use it. And we have to use things the appropriate way. We have to understand to use them the halal way, not as a Hail Mary at the end after all these years of looking, but in the very beginning. For example, when you enter into the beach and you run halfway up and then you run back to go back into the half track and you say, ouch, I got shot in the leg. Why did I get shot in the leg? It's because you spent all that time outside the half track. Get in the beginning. Don't wait. What's the point of waiting? The thing is, the reason I use these examples is because logically it's insanity. If you have a system that's created and you have a problem, imagine if you're somebody at the age of 40 with young kids right now, and you understand the problems of the past and the problems of the future. Your head must be spinning, like, what can I do? We have the system for you that's already been developed. Now the question is that there's a lot of things that are here that kind of push people in different directions. And it's not a fault of their own. It's basically a situation in which they haven't had someone to speak to them. And we are the ones who are speaking to you now, at least to help you out, to understand how to go through this process. And now when somebody comes to you and says basically that the purpose of marriage is X, Y, Z, what you say to them is, show me that in the Quran. Show me that in how it's supported by other verses. Because I believe in the whole Quran. I don't believe in nitpicking certain parts of the Quran. I believe the entirety of the Quran. And I understand that the Quran is interwoven. And, beyond this, we have to understand that specifically with the unmarried state, we have to consider that this unmarried state is the unnatural state. A lot of people think that he's too young to get married. He has to grow a bit more. He has to go out and see the world. He has to find himself. The thing is that we have to go back to understanding what marriage is. After the age of puberty, our creation, our ability to develop, our entire structure and design was to find a mate. And the longer we wait after puberty, in which we don't find a mate, it's similar to people who refuse to eat when there's food in front of them. Do you want to say something, sister, before you move to the next point?
No, I think we can move on.
Okay. So for those of you, say you're young, right? And say you don't have much money, and okay, I need to figure out a way to get married. Who do I approach? Because I want to approach this first. Now we have to understand a few things. And Zubair, I want you to actually we already did the poll for this. Most of people didn't really understand the process of marriage. There's a difference between responsibility and assistance. When you are a boy in Islam, Tasir, tell me who's responsible to get for a girl's marriage in Islam?
Well, basically, it's the wali, the guardian.
The guardian.
He is responsible for some. He's the one who signs the nikah form, but he's also responsible more for an unmarried girl.
Yeah.
So we can talk more about the widows later, or we can just mention it now that.
Yeah, you can mention it. Go ahead.
Basically, widows are since they've already been in a relationship with the husband, they're more familiar with men, so they have a little bit more say in terms. They have, I mean, both have say, but you can't force any person against their will to marry. But what I'm saying is that they have say in terms of selecting a mate. Whereas for an unmarried girl, I believe in that garments for each other. Sometimes the girl can just either say yes or she can just stay silent, and that indicates her approval. Because when the wali is usually a father for an unmarried girl, and then that kind of the guardian then becomes a husband, and when the husband passes away, she's a widow. So it's it's not, the wali is not as clear at that point to our understanding.
So we have to. So in this story now, say if you got in the half track, you got in the tank, and you're kind of going up the beach to storm the beach, and at this point in time, you have to learn how to drive. At this point, you can't just haphazardly use the system. So you have to know the responsibilities of what does what. The first thing we have to understand, according to Islam, after the age of puberty, you're responsible to make sure you live this sin-free life. You can't depend upon other people to decide for you. You have to read the Quran yourself. You have to take responsibility. At this point in time, you must take the reins and understand what is good and what is bad for me. You have to read and you have to research. You can't depend upon hearsay. You can't depend upon other people. You can get assistance from other people, but depending upon them, then the burden of sin is upon yourself. What that means is that if there's someone that prevents you from getting married, at that point in time, they have to have the authority to do so. Is there anybody who has authority in the Quran that goes above the authority of Allah? No, of course not. And at this point in time, if there's a prophet that has created a system for us, we should be encouraged to use that system. If you're 16 years old and you're having an issue, the Jamaat is behind you. Go use the system. Contact your Sanata department. Tell them about the situation. We're here to help you out. Everyone's here to help you out. If you have a problem, we will assist you. However, you have to understand a few things. First things first, in terms of a marriage, you have to be a qawwamun. And at that point in time, it's not something that you have at the end. It's the potential that matters more than anything else. What I mean by this is that in Islam, your mother doesn't bear the responsibility to find you a spouse. They can assist. However, they don't bear that responsibility. Nor does the father. They can assist for their own success. They can assist, and they should. However, it's your responsibility to maintain chastity. And if there's a system that's there that allows you to maintain chastity, then what prevents you from accessing that system? Even when you recite, if you recite yes at a nikah ceremony, it's the boy and it's the wali. It's not the boy's mother and the boy and the wali. It's not the boy's father and the wali. It's the boy. It's the man who's getting married. At that point in time, the young man. When you hit puberty and you're fully physically developed, you're a young man. Now the problem is that we have an issue, a fundamental problem that is winging a lot of people before they get to the end of that beach, before they even enter the boat to get to that beach. It's a problem of mental development. The issue we have now is that a lot of people don't understand what it means to have a child that you nurture and you raise. The Quran says that there is a process of development for children in which the mother nurses children. And at that point in time, as a qawwamun, it talks about how you treat orphans and you test them. And the reason why we mention this is that we can't control when we have physical development. It just can't be controlled. However, in order to be ready to be a husband, you have to have that mental development. Now, to what extent? Does that mean that you know how to, Like, for example, you have a house, you have a job, you have a car, you know how to handle all these things, you know how to balance your checkbook, all these other, the minimum requirement is to be a kavamun and have that potential. That matters more than anything else. That potential being there. Go ahead.
It's the potential, right? It's the potential, not necessarily they need to have all the resources, right at the time of marriage. It's the potential. And like Azur said in that garments book, sometimes that maturity or responsibility, sense of responsibility comes after marriage.
Yeah. And the
So
thing is
for the
go
people
ahead.
who are like, what's the difference between like a kavamun and a wali?
Are you asking me or?
Yeah, I'm asking you to clarify.
So, the key item here is that a kavamun is a maintainer. The kavamun is chosen to do tasks because they excel at those specific tasks. It's not that they were chosen because they excel completely over the other gender. It's because for those specific items they excel. For example, a man in a situation, say a very primitive situation, is a man who provides for his family. A man who's able to go out and hunt an animal and kill the animal and provide it for his wife, who's nursing a child. At that point in time, you don't expect the wife with a child in hand, with a child in the womb, to go out hunting. You expect the man to do so because he's been geared to do so. The hormones that Allah Ta'ala has created for us allow us to express that desire to go out and take the world by the reins and provide for our families. At that point in time, the government is also responsible to grow the family, to provide for the family, to educate and to develop the family too. However, in order for this to start, you have to have the empathetic seed. So when someone's looking for someone to marry to their daughter, what people are looking for is money. Frankly, that's what's happening nowadays. They're looking for money. However, that's not successful, because what you should be looking for is you should be looking for somebody who's chaste and has a potential of being that kavamun. It's the mindset that matters more. It's not about how much money you have in the bank. It's not about what you're physically at right now. It's the mindset that matters. That's what matters more than anything else. Actually, there's a story in the Quran. We're going to go through this year, and you know where we're going to, but did you want to say anything before we go through the story?
No, I think basically I said we talked about the potential, and that's like the more important point, not actually having the resources at that time.
Yeah. So
By the
before we
way,
go to
can you hear me fine?
Yeah, I can hear you. Totally fine.
Okay.
No problem
Okay.
whatsoever. So before we go into the story, there is a concern that I see, and a lot of people would like mixed gatherings for finding a spouse. The reason why these things occur is because when we're young, we have an expectation created by a seed that was implanted in us by a non-Islamic source. We have to understand that as Muslims, we are never encouraged. I mean, seeing once is one thing, but we're never encouraged to openly go out and look at women, ever. And these type of situations in which people are cataloging, because what happens when you're in a situation where there's 20 girls in front of you, what you're doing mentally is you're cataloging each female and you're comparing body features for each female. And then you're playing basically a slot machine with each of these body features until you get the exact right lineup. And then you're like, let me go after that person. You're not marrying people for their personality. You're marrying people for a catalog that you created. That's against Islam. However, that being said, what that means is that as a wali, we should be consistently looking out for potential. It's a two-way street. These boys that enter into the age of puberty, they're entering completely blind, completely dark. When they enter that half track, the half track is dark. Nothing, they can't see anything. The wali's there with the flashlight to direct them towards the right way. Both are required for this interaction to occur. Zubair, are you ready for the verses? You just need to do the English, not the Arabic. And after each verse, we're going to stop and explore it. Now, before I do this, the Quran uses examples and presents examples, and each word the Quran uses and the way it uses those examples is very important to understand because it communicates a very specific message. We're going to go through the message of how Moses was married because it's honestly the best example when you fully understand based on what we were speaking before, it makes so much sense. Go ahead, Zubair.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And there came a man from the far side of the city running. He said, O Moses, of a truth, the chiefs are taking counsel together against thee to kill thee. Therefore, get thee away. Surely I am of thy well-wishers.
So Allah Ta'ala narrates us to a story, and I mean, at this point in time, I'm taking everything that's said here and I'm understanding that it means something. In this situation, Moses was being sought out to be killed from an unjust people. And specifically, he needed to leave Egypt, and it was basically him being exiled by force, because if he stayed, he would be killed. And at this point in time, he's been disenfranchised. Everything he has, gone, completely gone, penniless, nothing. At this point in time, it's just him. And go to the next verse.
So he went forth therefrom, fearing, watchful. He said, My Lord, deliver me from the unjust people.
And at this point in time, he had to leave, and he wanted to be delivered from these unjust people, and he prayed to God at this point. His intention was to leave this situation, nothing else. That's what it's setting up the intention, that his intention is basically to save himself from the incoming doom that's coming. Go ahead, and what's next?
And when he turned his face towards Midian, he said, I hope my Lord will guide me in the right way.
So at this point in time, he's putting his full trust into God. His idea about his life at this, can you imagine what you're thinking at this point? If I were to tell you right now, you got to leave your house and you just got to go. At this point in time, what would you be thinking about? You'd be completely in a state of panic. And if you're a righteous person, you would supplicate to Allah this exact same type of prayer. Everything has been uprooted for you. Go ahead, what's the next verse?
And when he arrived at the water of Midian, he found there a party of men watering their flocks. And he found beside them 2 women keeping back their flocks. He said, What is the matter with you? They replied, We cannot water our flocks until the shepherds take away their flocks, and our father is a very old man.
Notice it's very important, the situation that's being presented here. He arrived at a watering location. And at this location, he's observing the location and he's actively looking at what's happening here. The first thing he sees is he sees people watering animals, and he sees another group and their animals are being pulled back. It doesn't say that he came there and he saw women. It said he came there and he saw a situation, a problem. The first thing he saw in his head was a problem. And what he did was he approached the women to help them with the problem, to hear them, to be empathetic. At that point in time, he had nothing. He was penniless. He didn't come there with a gold on his body. He didn't come in there with anything, just his clothes, and he came there to assist. And it was very
to the problem.
Yes.
He wasn't looking at the woman.
It's not like he's doing the work. It's not like for example, if you're like a boy in the Lajna side and you're lifting up water bottles and you're doing it in a specific way because people are watching you and you're really conscious of what's happening. That's not the story here. He's not doing something good so that people can see what he's doing. He's doing something because he's legitimately concerned about the situation. What's the next one? The next verse.
So he watered their flocks for them. Then he turned aside into the shade and said, My Lord, I am in need of whatever good thou mayst send down for me.
It's very important that we understand what's happening here. At this point in time, he assisted, and then he didn't continue contact with them. He didn't ask them, oh, where's your father? Oh, what's the weather like today? Oh, what's happening? He specifically only assisted. And at that point in time, he sat down. He said, whatever you can, it's very important we understand, like, whatever you can send down, I am okay with it. He is not being picky at this point. He just wants whatever Allah Ta'ala can send down for him. It's very important we understand that once he helped them, he didn't engage with them further. Allah Ta'ala makes this a point. When he tells us a story, there's a reason why he's saying these things. They're not a mistake. If we believe that this book is a divine book created by a creator with perfect understanding, with perfect will to will whatever he wants, there's a reason why he's explaining these things to us. Go ahead. What's the next item?
And one of the 2 women came to him, walking bashfully. She said, My father calls thee that he may reward thee for thy having watered our flocks for us. So when he came to him and told him the story, he said, Fear not, thou hast escaped from the unjust people.
Consider what just happened. The Quran specifically mentions he's an older man. The reason why, even that, the Quran could have said he's a man, but why an older man? In this specific situation, this older man does not have, obviously if he had sons, he would send his sons. But instead he had to send his daughters because of the situation they were in. And if the people around him were just, you can imagine he would marry his daughters off to those people. In this specific situation, even after Moses sat down, there was a time period after this in which nothing occurred in terms of Moses was waiting and this female went back to her father. And at that point in time, she must have, because he's not clairvoyant, she must have, any person with reason would know that she must have told him what occurred. And at that point in time, as a wali, The bells dinged in his head that, wait a minute, this person's a person of empathy. All he did was help them and nothing else. He, being an old man, understood that his purpose was to find this person to help my family. And at this point in time, they didn't say anything. All they said was that they want to reward him and he wants to see him. If you can go ahead, you want to say something?
Basically, the daughter came as a representative of her father, and she came, I think the word used is bashfully. She didn't come to socialize with Hazrat Musa alayhi salam. She just said, like, my father wants to see you and reward you.
And at that point in time, there's an interview, in a sense that the Kavamun is trying to figure out what this person's about. And if we understand this story does not have a useless meaning. This story means something. It's basically showing us the interaction between a Wali that's a Kavamun recognizing another Kavamun. And at this point in time, there's a communication happening between them. He told them the story. He came to them, and this is what he learned. I'm penniless. I'm on the run. I have no job. And right now, I'm homeless too. Think about the example that's being shown in the Quran. Penniless, have no job, on the run. People want to kill me, and I'm homeless too. Because in the very end, fear not, thou hast escaped from an unjust people. That shows that he escaped in the sense that he had nothing on him because he's seeing what he has on him right now. They're trying to destroy him, and he has no wealth, nor does he have a home. Because right now he's out of his home. He's gone. What's the next verse, Zubair?
One of the two women said, O my father, hire him. For the best man that thou canst hire is one who is strong and trustworthy.
I have a question. If this is a righteous family, would they ever have a man inside working for this family when there's women in the same household? Think about this. It wouldn't happen. What's being indirectly said here is she's asking in an indirect way that this person should be part of our family. That she's expressing basically that this person is a trustworthy person. It's very important that these words are being shown, that the daughter's showing that she's showing that there's some interest, at least in the person's character and demeanor, that the person's trustworthy and strong. Kavamun. This person is a person who can provide. This person is a person who can assist us. And also righteous. This person is a trustworthy person. This person tells the truth. There's a recognition here. What's the next verse?
He said, I intend to marry one of these two daughters of mine to thee on condition that thou serve me on hire for 8 years. But if thou complain 10 years, it will be of thine own accord. And I would not lay any hardship upon thee. Thou wilt find me, if Allah wills, of the righteous.
The father was of the righteous, and he recognized someone else of the righteous. And at this point in time, this is literally the nakah, and this is literally the contract that's being signed by word right now. It's going directly from the wali. Go ahead.
Since he was basically penniless, that was, to their understanding, his dowry. Basically working for 8 years, or 10 or 8 years, I think was what it was.
It's 10 of his own accord.
Yeah, so that was basically his dowry.
Think about how simple this was. Think about it. Does it mention who's missing in the story, by the way?
You're asking me? Oh, yeah, right.
I'm asking you, go ahead. The mother-in-law is missing in the story.
And mother-in-law.
Musa's parents and mother-in-law. And go ahead, Zubair. What's the next verse?
He said, Then it is settled between me and thee. Whichever of the two terms I fulfill, there shall be no injustice to me, and Allah watches over what we say.
Think about what's happening. Physically thinking about what's happening. He's speaking to this man, and this daughter's not across the room using telepathy to talk to her father. The women are right there. They're all sitting together. And the Kavamun right now, the Wali, is interviewing another potential Kavamun. And the daughter says that this person looks like somebody who can strong enough, but also is trustworthy too. And the old man says, I am of the righteous. The reason why this is being narrated, in this situation, the Wali is not saying, oh, you need to finish school before you have a situation and then come back later on. Even the Wali, Moses didn't approach the Wali. The Wali actually approached Moses.
Yeah, that's very interesting too, that the Wali approached Moses and he sent a message to his daughter, but it was the Wali who approached Hazrat Musa.
What is this trying to explain to us as Muslims that are believers? What is valuable what's the point of marriage? Is the point of marriage you have to wait until your daughter's 25 years old to find somebody who hits a tick mark of can provide me enough money so I can retire? Is that the tick mark? No. In this situation, this man was old. He was decrepit at this point in time. It made a very clear, what's it called, suggestion that this man was so old that he couldn't complete his work anymore. If he was looking for money, he would just marry daughters off to anybody. But that's not what he was looking for. He was looking for somebody who was trustworthy and strong. His daughter recognized that. He was looking for somebody who was righteous.
Surely you will find me among the righteous.
And he says this to Moses too, that this is a righteous family. And Allah Ta'ala, why would he put this in the Quran if it was not a true statement? Think about it. The point is that in this case, the example we have, for those of you who are young, who are sitting there thinking, you need to be the voice for what this is. When you go out, you have to understand that you have to have a certain set standard. And if somebody doesn't meet that standard of righteousness, if somebody doesn't agree with you and they say to you, son, you need to be a bit older and you need to have a job before you can marry my daughter, perhaps that's not the person to look towards. And it's not like we have a deficiency of women in our community right now. In fact, we have a majority of women. Can you recite the figures from 2000? Was it 2004?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the garments book. At that time, it was. If you give me a minute, but I believe it was 8-1.
Yeah, it was. And the thing is that it was 8-1, and I feel like a lot of people are getting involved with the Sanatha system now. However, there's still a problem in which there's a lot of people unmarried. Even if it's 2-1, it doesn't mean that if one boy marries one girl, there's only one girl left. That means if 100 boys marry 100 girls, there's still 100 girls left. There's still a problem. 100 girls unmarried is still a problem. In terms of ratios, yes, it sounds nice. Okay, 1, and then one's left. That's not what we're looking at here. We're looking at a whole population of girls that are going to remain unmarried. And at this point in time, people are being picky. Because what's happening is you have people who grow up who catalog women and who have basically a serious catalog of what they desire. And they say, Mom, I need to have someone with this, 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 this in order for me to get married to them. And the reason why these desires are created is because you created a taste based upon artificial environments. Can you imagine if you have no concept of what actual marriage is and all you see is women with makeup on, what your perception of what a woman is? It's completely perverted at that point in time. You have no idea what women actually are, and you're cataloging your desires. And the next verse we'll go into after this, Zubair, you can read the English for this, is basically about mate selection. Because the thing is this, is that if we have a situation in which, somebody with the potential of being strong and trustworthy is a candidate for marriage who's righteous also, they have to be righteous. At that point in time, for those who are looking for a spouse, we have to talk about the standards. And the thing is, the reason why I bring up that the mother-in-law and the mother was not into this is that with a situation which finding a marriage, you have to understand as a qawwamun, marriage is a very risky situation. When you consider what it is, you basically are trusting someone to be a permanent mate bond with another person. As a father who has a daughter, I would have to trust someone else to take care of my daughter, to make sure they don't cause her distress. It's a risky situation. And however, the thing is that a mother is very nurturing. Mothers are very nurturing. They're very protective of their children. It's part of their nature. That being the case, there are situations in which their protection can overstep and cause problems. Because as boys, to be a qawwamun, we have to figure out things for ourselves. The Quran talks about marrying off orphans and giving them their money, that those who are in charge, the qawwamun, the guardians for those orphans, they have to test them. The reason why is they have to know that once they get the money, once they get the responsibility, they can handle the responsibility. And the only way you can test someone is that you have to first teach them first. You can't test someone without teaching them. As a father, that's what you must do. So growing up, you have a mother who nurtures a child. And then growing up, you have a father who teaches the boy the things that are necessary to survive in this world. And we have a major problem in that a lot of people are not being taught what it takes to survive. Going up that beach myself, not many people taught me what I needed to do. I had to learn from watching other people flip-flop around landmines, practically. That's what I had to do and avoid them. And by chance, I reached the other side. The problem is that as veterans for this, this struggle, we understand what it takes now. And we have an idea of what it takes. And we understand that what the necessities are. If you're a wali and you're looking for someone to take care of your daughter, what do you want? What's the goal you want? You want somebody who has a high potential of being chaste? Or do you want somebody who's been out in that battlefield a little bit too long, who's a little bit half-baked with PTSD, who has questionable history? As a wali, if you're looking, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like sometimes, when you look for rishtas or relationships, potential matches, we sometimes say that, oh, we have to look for within family or family friends because we know their history, it's safer. But I think marrying young, at age, like for example 15 or just puberty, I think automatically that like doubt is removed a bit, because you can how much questionable history can like a 15-year-old have compared to like a 30-year-old.
Yeah. Zubair, can you recite, not recite, just read verse 26 of Surah 426?
And whoso of you cannot afford to marry free, believing and whoso of you cannot afford to marry free, believing women, let him marry what your right hands possess, namely your believing handmaids. And Allah knows your faith best. You are all one from another, so marry them with the leave of their masters, and give them their dowries accordingly to what is fair. They being chaste, not committing fornication, nor taking secret parameters. And if after they are married, they are guilty of lewdness, they shall have half the punishment prescribed for free women. This is for him among you who fears lest he should commit sin, and that you restrain yourselves is better for you, and Allah is most forgiving, merciful.
Yeah. And the thing is that people read restraint as celibacy. That's not, according to the other verses, that's not what it is. In terms of restraint, is that we should restrain ourselves from committing sin, literally the sentence before it. And that's really the goal here, to prevent yourself from committing sin. If you're 16 years old and you find yourself having an issue where you have this type of like automatic auto stimulation problem, you have to understand that at this point in time you need to figure out how to solve this issue, and it's your responsibility to figure out how to solve it. I know it's radical, because what's going to happen now is that we're going to have a lot of kids who want, a lot of young adults, see, even with me, like my history pushes them towards being kids, but they're young adults. They're old enough to know what to do and how to get things done. They're young adults, and we have to push them basically the right avenue of approach. We've told them basically the restrictions that they require. They have to figure out how to be empathetic for someone else's desires. They have to almost destroy themselves and mold themselves with someone else. And it's very easy to do at the age of 15, but when you're 30 years old and you have a catalog of female traits and personalities that you have to figure out the exact person, that's extremely difficult to do. Beyond that, this is not something that's telling you to do this lightly. It's telling you just for the fact that you want to avoid to commit sin. The word sin here, it's not the most important things we have to understand is avoidance of sin completely. That, and also this uses the same sections of chaste, avoiding fornication, avoiding secret parameters. So that means that you have to avoid the situation in which you are finding a relationship based upon the eye games you're playing, the mental games, the texting back and forth, being friends, big quotes before marriage. And you have to avoid all of these. And even then, there are two categories of women that are mentioned here. The first category being chaste, muhsanati, mu'minati, believing women. What that means is that women that didn't have the situation in which they're exposed to these things, because chastity is not just a physical interaction, prevention of physical interactions. What it is prevention of the mental interactions too. And then beyond that, of those who are disenfranchised, it still wants those categories. Do you want to say something this year?
I wanted to say something. Maybe I can say it now. Like how you're saying that for someone who's very young, how can they find a match? Maybe we'll get into it a little bit.
Yeah, it's tough because
so it's like it's more just like in the Hazrat Musa story, it was the wali who approached, because a young or teenager can't really, or she really actually ideally shouldn't know who has daughters, who has sisters, right? So it's actually it makes sense that the wali would approach the or potentially see who is a marriageable candidate and look at, and see the boys and have interaction that way, and because they know who has, like the wali is the one who knows that he has daughters, and that interaction can be done initially through If you want to, some people say, we want to interact more with each other before marriage, because we interact with people in school all the time, and when it comes to like Jamaat, like we don't really interact with the females, but the way to get to know them is first through the wali, and then after that, when it gets, obviously you're allowed to see when it gets more like further down the process, but um before that, like it's, and even if, and if you want to even have more information, it can even be done, if you're not comfortable with their parents or your parents, it can be done through a mediator like the Rishtanata department. And I actually want to read something
Go ahead.
from that article again, if you just give me a minute here. It was the question was, let's see, Your Holiness, are couples allowed to see each other before marriage according to Islam? And Hazur replied, one may find out more details about the family and their conduct at home, right? Permission has also been granted to see each other's appearance. Once in the time of Holy Prophet ﷺ, a boy came for a proposal and asked if he could see the girl. Her father was outraged and said, who is he to see my daughter? And he said he would beat him. Yet when the daughter learned from that the Holy Prophet ﷺ had given permission for a meeting, she immediately stepped forward. The boy in response lowered his head down. In response to this, the girl said, and she unconditionally accepted his proposal for marriage. So you could see, like, before the marriage, it was, the details were found out about the family, or Hazur was saying that you can find out more details about the family and their conduct at home, but doesn't mean that you directly interact privately or in private areas or private meetings with a girl. Like, this can be done through the wali actually.
Yeah, and somebody had a question about the wali. The wali is the person who would be the representative for nikah. It's the kavamun that has to basically root out, and as we've seen in the example of the Quran, the example of the wali that was given there is somebody who sought information about the person who would be a potential candidate for marriage. At that point in time, specifically Hazrat Musa's story, what we saw was that the wali interviewed him about his past. And then when they determined that he was a good match, that's when he suggested marriage. And he proposed. Now, at this point in time, if you're young, the only thing I can say is that it's a rough road ahead. I understand that right now it's a situation in which you feel like you're uncertain and you don't have the support that you need. However, right now you're a pioneer. It's a brave new world out there, in that we know what the problems are. We know what needs to be done. The abandonment of people getting married young, we now know is a mistake. It was not something that we intended to happen. It just happened because of the chaos we had from entering into this country now. However, now we have a situation in which we can get you across. We can help you out. Now that we know what the fortress of chastity is, it's marriage. We can help you out, figure out what it is. Allah Ta'ala, when He creates people, He creates a creation. He creates it with a specific set mind, in the sense that there's a plan. At this point in time, we understand that when you grow up and you reach that physical age, that's the age of finding your mate. The mate was created for you. That means that you have to have that symbiotic bond. And it's beautiful to have that bond at a young age, because your brain is designed to find it out, to attach yourself to it, and to basically symbiotically bond yourself with it. And at this point in time, the second step to that is your parents raising you to become the potential kavamun, the provider, the person of strength and security for your mate. And at this time, what will occur is that you'll have a situation in which, even before you understand what it means to have that false desire, you'll have something to fulfill it. The problem we have right now is we have kids, and what we do is we practically tell them, we're gonna tell
all
you
that baggage.
Before all that baggage. Listen, this is what you need to do. You need to stop eating. And the child asks, but I'm hungry now. Well, listen, son, you need to stop eating because there's much better food coming about three days from now. And the son's sitting there, the parent leaves the room, and there's a bunch of other kids there. And the son sees off in the corner of his eye, some kids sneak food in his mouth. Some other kids sneak food in his mouth. And then the next day, his stomach is in pain. And the parent comes back in and says that, why can't you wait, man? These other kids can wait. And the son's just sitting there with the mind boggled, because what he sees is a situation in which the age and perception of keeping chaste has been artificially increased by situations that in the Quran is saying that this is what's happening. If you have a situation in which there's a problem, you don't tell people to wait. What you tell people to do is find the halal and the the tayyib way of expressing it, the pure way. And what I mean is, in terms of food, is you find the pure way that the Quran has said. It's not that you choose what is right or wrong. The Quran has a pathway. So in this case, if that child is hungry, in this verse, what it says, if you feel like you're going to have a situation in which you're going to sin, it's better for you almost to marry someone of the prisoner of war class than it is to commit sin. Think about what it's saying. Even in the long commentary, it says that this situation was problematic. It's not that it's trying to encourage you to do this at all times. It's encouraging you to marry chaste, believing women. And if you can't find someone out of them, find someone else. And the other verse about marrying those who are not married right now, it's telling you specifically that it wants you to eliminate and to reduce the amount of people walking around unmarried. The most beautiful thing I can imagine in terms of marriage are two kids who grew up together, who didn't understand, they don't know what it means to have those type of unpure thoughts for someone else, but that were put in a situation in which they were married off. And the first thoughts they had about the opposite gender were for each other. Could you imagine how strong a relationship that would be? And at that point in time, those two children form a strong bond that no one can break. To them, divorce is unfathomable because they don't even imagine what it is to live without another person. They can't even fathom what that is. And with the female, she has attached herself emotionally completely to the male, and then the male the same way to the female. And both of them are a unit almost, one organism. One organism. Zubair, can you pull up the verse for Nakah that is read? And they're one organism, and they're almost like they're garments for each other. And that word garment, at that point in time, it's the only understanding we had as a covering. But now if you think about what that means, they're almost molded together. And they're one unit, and the covering for one is the covering for the other. What we have to understand is that this symbiotic bond between man and woman is the design of how we're supposed to be. And when it's not there, are you ready? No, not yet. It's not there specifically for just some sort of keystone for our lives. It's there for a design purpose that we're supposed to fulfill. And when we don't fulfill it, as somebody who ran up the beach, a lot of older people would think that maybe he can wait. What occurs first is you have a physical problem. And guess what happens when you tell something to do something against their nature? You eventually have a mental problem. And you have a mental issue in which these kids will have baggage. Just by not doing anything, just by sitting out there. It's almost like PTSD. How many times can you get shot before you're scared of getting shot again? If you're sitting in high school, you're sitting in college, it's not like you're sitting there and nothing is happening. You're sitting there and the aroma of people around you is forcing themselves into your nose. Basically, the eye games you don't want to play, you feel the eye games being played with you. You have situations in which females start seeing you as an object of affection because of your exclusivity, and they're pursuing you. Because in their primitive mind, the primitive mind of any animal says anything that's exclusive must be more valuable. Zubair, do you have it?
O ye people, fear your Lord who created you from a single soul and created therefrom its mate. And from them twain spread many men and women, and fear Allah in whose name you appeal to one another, and fear him particularly respecting ties of relationships. Verily Allah watches over you.
In this situation, we see that both of them are part of one unit. That we were created to become this structure. So at the age of 15, at the age of 16, when this unit's not presented to you, guess what's going to happen? What you're going to have is destruction of sorts. First, it starts off as a physical problem. And that physical problem creates neuron pathways that will delay and destroy your ability to create that emotional bond. And you're looking around at the age of 20, 21, and you see that people are in relationships and there's something missing from your heart. And then you grow up a little bit older, the age of 27 and 28, and you don't have that child, and then that hole gets bigger. And it's just burning a hole in your soul almost. Allah Ta'ala has created this desire for a reason. To deny it almost is to be somebody who is ungrateful. And in this specific situation, we're not saying that somebody who can't find a wife has a problem. What we're saying is that if you have something in front of you, if you have the ability to do so, still do it. You know, the reason why these things are mentioned is that it's supposed to avoid sin. That's the prime purpose, to avoid sin, to remain chaste, to enter into that fortress. Those two kids, when they get married, they enter into the fortress of chastity. Now let's think about it mathematically. Say if I got married at the age of 30 and I had my first kid at the age of 32. If my next child does that, how old am I before the next child comes? Think about it. 64 years old. So I'm 64 years old. I have a son who's 32 years old, and they have a baby now.
Yeah, I think this is also like, like there's a concern about like, okay, now, we're supporting our children, and now we have to support the child who's like a late teenager or teenager, and in addition to his wife. I think one way of thinking about it is that instead of supporting them until 30, you support them until like 15 and support the other person until like half that time. So it's like a 7 years. It basically ends up being the same, and they can also start, they gain that sense of responsibility after marriage. And
Yeah.
what you were saying is that like when you have more generations born, like if you have someone married every 20 years, you have a new generation. You have someone at 60, 40, 20. You have all the generations taking care of each other. So instead of one generation being sandwiched in the middle between the very old and very young, you have more support actually.
Yeah, that's true. When you have someone who's 30 years old and their father is 64 years old, and they're the oldest of their family, what you basically have is a situation in which the father is thinking, I'm getting old, I have to retire now, and I can't think of doing too much more expenses. So my son needs to pick up the slack and take care of me now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure my investment remains profitable. And that's a problem, because what happens is by ignoring the need to have that type of relationship for your son at a young age, what you're occurring is you're artificially increasing the gap in the age between the young and the old. Let's look at it the other way. Imagine if you were 20 years old when you had your first child, and your father did the same, and you're the oldest, and your child's the oldest, and your father is of the oldest of his family too. What your father is by the time you're 20, your father is 40 years old. By the time you're 40, your father is 16, his father is 80 years old. So when you had your first child, your father was 40 years old, and his father was 60 years old, and his father was 80 years old. At that point in time, if there's a support structure, it is completely capable of supporting people. The distribution of labor is much better. So in a situation where the father is 40 years old, he has to take care of his 20-year-old, help out with his 20-year-old kid, there's somebody who's older than him that's overseeing them. There's somebody even older than them that's overseeing them all. You have different layers. If you need to go to school and if you have a stable family and you need to go to school, you have an entire structure of people to help you out. That's the thing, is that what we have now is we have a situation in which people are so old when they have children that they feel like they're taxed by the time their kids grow up. And the kids are looking at their parents, and it says, instead of saying, people see that, hey, what's up, grandpa? Like, no, I'm not your grandpa, I'm your dad. And you can't physically do it. How are you going to teach your son? Think about it. If you are at that age in which you're 30 by the time you have a child, by the time your child turns 15 years old, you're 45 years old. What survival skills can you pass along to that child? Growing up now, the thing that I think about consistently is if I was younger when I had my children, I could have taught them the way of my ways of physically interacting with this world, my skills, my abilities, but showing them in my prime rather than my decrepitcy. Even in my age, I didn't marry that old, but I still think about it. Every young father thinks about the same thing. By the time my kids are ready to know about what's what, I'll be too old to tell them. And they're going to look at me like an old man. How beautiful would it be for father and son to have a small age gap so the father and the son can learn from each other, so he can still see his father as a strong, trustworthy person? How can you see someone as a kavamun if they're not able to physically provide, if they're not able to be that physical source of security for the family? There's still other factors out there. I know, I understand, but I'm saying in terms of a primitive situation in which people are going out to hunt. And in that type of situation, you want people to have that distribution of labor. And what's happening right now is you have kids that are growing up and their parents are much older because they also delay their marriages. And these poor children now are stuck because what will happen is they have to take care of their parents, and also they're trying to get married themselves. And those people who have situations in which their parents want them to take care of them, they're right now looking towards both situations, and right now they're suffering. The problem is that we have to understand, when we build a society, we have to build it from the ground up. We can't just pick and choose different avenues. We have to understand it's a complete system. And as a complete system, when we don't follow the complete system, we fall susceptible to the poisons that occur. The mighty and the praiseworthy only come by when we follow the path. And in the situation that we have now, we have situations in which the sons may not even be interested in marriage, because what will happen is they're used to the catalog, the Sears catalog of females that they've been developing since they were the age of 15, from the eye-looking game that they've been playing since the age of 15. And the eye-looking game has progressed from the classroom to their phone. in which they can see any body part. And their catalog is vast. Their catalog is so vast that their brains are almost spinning on how many things they've seen. And
Yeah, in the
now,
past, like all you could really interact with was if you want to interact with the opposite gender. I'm talking about like hundreds or thousands of years ago. Maybe during the Prophet's time, you could only interact by either visiting or writing a letter.
yeah,
So like,
it
and
was
now
very rare.
it's all over.
and now there's so many avenues that it becomes almost, it's a problem for people to focus, because what happens now is you have these kids growing up and they have this amazingly vast catalog, and when they try to compare it to the females that they want, what will happen is it's sad, but if you ignore the needs of a child and you say to them, I don't want you to eat, and then they come to you hungry, at that point in time, it's too late. As a mother and a father, you need to make sure that you provide those needs before the child yells out. And what occurs is that with the process of marriage, a boy is responsible to find his own spouse. However, as a father of that boy, you want to do best for your own family. So it's best if you assist. It's the best as a mother you assist. But if you get in the way or you ignore, that becomes a humongous problem. In assisting, you have to understand that this person is growing up and they have needs. If I don't find them, it's not like they're going to sit there static. They're going to figure out things on their own. And when they figure out things on their own, it's a spoiler, but it happens multiple times. These kids have their own tastes that they develop. And then once parents have a small inkling of what occurred, in which this son or daughter, something happened outside the realm of chastity, they panic. Just like human nature. When there's a problem, they panic. There's verses in the Quran that talk about people who desire money over anything else and how the garden was destroyed for them. In the morning, they're like sitting there dumbfounded, like, wait a minute, what happened here? And they're saying to one another, what happened? The reason why these things are mentioned is because humans panic when they don't follow the right path, and the punishment comes. So when the son here, or the father hears, Abba, she's so righteous, all he's thinking, spinning in his head, is my investment is gone. Because that's how he was thinking about it.
Yeah, and
That's how. Go
yeah,
ahead.
related to that, so also that like once they want to find somebody, they want to marry somebody who's not yet a convert, but they have non-Muslim or non-Muslim parents. It's actually, even in Western society, it's customary to go through the wali, and we talked about this earlier. I should have mentioned at that time that in the Review of Religions article, it says, interestingly, according to one survey from 2016, 77% of men in the USA asked permission for marriage from the father or parents of the girl. Whilst this indicates the tradition is seemingly alive and well in the West, does it hold anywhere near the same significance as in the past, beyond it being a formality?
Yeah, that's very
then
true.
for those Western couples that do value this custom, it would demonstrate that the influence of parents and their children's relationships isn't unique to just Muslim communities. So basically,
Go ahead.
it's it's that thing, like how to approach this, or how to have a relationship with this non-Muslim female in the right way. And even in Western society, they go through the father. There's that interaction between the wali and the potential groom.
It's like seeing someone use a tool the wrong way. It's like you travel into the future and you see someone using a Nikon camera like a hammer, because the concept of waliyat, it's not a cultural thing. They've created it as a cultural thing, but to them, for those who are Judeo-Christian, spoiler alert, we just spoke about it 20 minutes ago, the concept of wali was part of their religion, but to them now it's considered culture. And it's a formality, because to them they're more about appeasing the culture than appeasing God. And the situation we have now, it's a dire situation in which you have parents, and what will occur is, because of the situation of the delay, they're focusing more about the money than anything else. So when you go for a rishta, you have to understand a few things. If you are a boy and you're going, the first thing you have to, well, let's back up first. When the boy says to Abba, she's so righteous, and Abba's head is spinning, the reason why is because the father is like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong that this occurred? Of course, something's going to occur because you ignored the process of development that Allah Ta'ala has pointed out in the Quran. We as parents must make sure that our children are physically and mentally ready as early as possible. If they're not mentally ready, it's literally what you're doing is that beach, the boat, if you saw Saving Private Ryan, the door comes down and they don't know what they're seeing. You have to make sure they understand what to do when they get on that beach. And at that point in time, you have to make sure that beach is short as possible. If you're going to wait till they're 30 years old, that means they have to run a full stretch of 15 years before they can get to the fortress of chastity. How much damage can be done in those 15 years? And at that point in time, it's a bad situation. But what will occur is parents will panic when for the things that you do in private, the eye games, all these things that you do at school that your parents have no idea about, the things that you do in secret. There's a day in which they realize what occurred. At first, they kind of ignore it because it's too much of a serious situation that they don't want to acknowledge what's occurred, because it's like what's happening now with the virus. It's just a strong thing. A lot of people just want to ignore it. What will occur over time is that it will force itself in front of you. And at that point in time, the parents panic. When the parents panic, it's ironic, but the situation is funny. But what they'll do is they'll try to present the boy, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? What can we do for this? What about this person, this person, this person, this person? And the catalog is already done. The boys' tastes are way beyond what you could even imagine providing them. Their tastes are so refined. They want the slot machine of this eyes, this ears, this body feature, this personality trait, this type of education. They're going down the list of all these things they require. And the parents are trying to write these down, trying to find the exact right person. And they said, hey, wait a minute. We got this person that this person referred to. This is really good. Okay, let's get mom to go find this. This is a completely flawed process. What we need to do is we need to be cognizant when these children are young. Observe them when they're young. Teach them when they're very young what marriage is, so that they connect the two. The sexuality and marriage are one thing, that you don't do one without the other. Because what's happening now in society is disconnected too. People who you have, like, you can see this in the communities that have a disproportionate men and women. You have the main chick and you have the side chick. Basically what is it's separating the two. Because you have one you have the relationship with, and then you have one that's basically something you utilize. An objectification.
This is the society promotes the objectification of women. That's
and they tell us that
nude content online and through billboards, magazines, etc., etc.
And while they're on their phone trying to find a Tinder match, they tell us that polygamy is wrong. This is the way the society is. This is a beautiful society in which we can help people and let people see what we want. However, we as United States citizens have to understand this is our community too. And what we have, what people like to enforce upon other people, we have the freedom to do what we want. But also our religion's our freedom too. That being said, what will occur is that the parents will try to find the boy a match. And you'll have mothers that will take lead, because right now the nurturing nature goes into effect really strongly. And they say that, wait a minute, I feel pain because my boy right now, there's something wrong with him. I feel pain. So right now I'm going to basically find someone as fast as I can. However, what will occur is that the boy will be bothered so much that she'll find someone, and the boy's habits, there still remain. Because it's not the nikah we're going after. It's the fortress of chastity. Nikah is one portion of it. You can still do a nikah, however, not be chaste. That's not the point. You have what we want. It is a very important point. You can do a nikah and still not be chaste. What the goal of the Quran is for chaste people to do nikahs. We want chaste people to do nikah with other chaste people. When we look for a marriageable candidate, we want to remain chaste and we want to find other chaste people. So this being the case, go ahead.
That's why I think the verse says is you find chaste believing woman, and the relationship should be made with other chaste believing men.
Yes. And not even come anywhere near adultery. So then you have the boy who's the innocent person in this. Say the person who's been digging out bullets with a bayonet knife while they're running up the beach, and they're 25 years old and they're going for rishta. At this point in time, like even when I was 22, my situation was that basically I snapped and I was like, I need to find something. And at 25, I told my parents, I need to find someone. Either I will find someone or help me out, one of the two. And just like any other parents, they were kind of concerned, but believe me, that was in October, and then by December I had a nikah because I was determined to do what I needed to do. And what I did was I used the training I had from the Holy Quran for what I understood then to find someone. In the very beginning, when I sought out to find someone, the situation I had is we were going through rishta in Pakistan. And what occurred was that I was trying to find someone and people were asking me unusual questions, like how much money do you make? I had no job. I didn't finish my education then. At that point in time, I was just trying to find someone to marry. And people were looking for physical, material things. And what I learned very, 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 very early on, because I was being thoughtful about this, is that, you know what? I'm going to say I have nothing whatsoever. And at that point in time, even then, having nothing, people say, oh, he lives in the United States. At least there's that. And at that point in time, I was truthful. I'm a Waqf. I'm a Waqfeno. For all I know in my situation, I don't even know where in the world Huzur could send me. I have no idea. It was the truth at that time. And what will occur at that time specifically is it weeded out a lot of people. And then after I got married, I realized something else. That in the situation in which when I try to find a spouse, when we try to find the spouse of Rishnata system, we went through many rishte. And everyone had their own baggage, had their own agendas. People have their own way of handling things that are outside the pale of Islam. And really, that's not what you want to get associated with. When I went to the Rishnata system, the first person I found in that situation, the person who was interviewing me was a man. That was the first thing I saw, because before then it was mostly the daughters' mothers, and they're interviewing him about things, and I'm confused. Sitting in Pakistan, how would you know how a boy in America handles money? What experience do you have living in America that you would ask these questions? And even my mother was telling me, in this situation, it's unusual that people are asking about these things. However, the things that they need to ask about are things that are more religious based, but those things are not being asked. And what occurred to me when I realized when I was talking with another person who's a Kavamun is that they were asking me about things that were very basic. Do you do salat? What do you do for the Jamaat? Everything else. And they were very simple. All they did was ask a few things, see how I was like. And at that point in time, we said, okay, we don't want to do an engagement. Because honestly, to me personally, long engagements are almost, it's more than useless, to be honest. If you have an intention to marry someone, just do a nikah. What's the point of waiting? Just do the nikah. That's the Islamic process. Did Musa say, wait a minute. I need to get my stuff together because I'm homeless. I can't even get into this process right now. We need to hold up. I'll be back here in about 7 months when I figure out the exodus of where I got to get my money from. No, he did it right then and there. When he realized it was capable, he did it.
And many times we've heard of engagements breaking off because of petty issues. So, if it was a nikah, it would be a little bit more solidified.
Literally,
And
when you go
that
ahead.
parda thing about basically you can't really violate the commandments of parda, and engagements can be a little bit in a gray area there.
That's a problem.
There's no exception for parda, in terms of an engagement.
Yeah,
according to the Quran.
According to the Quran, the purpose when you have an engagement, there's no special category. What you're doing is you're promising to marry. But at that point in time, that's only so you can get the nikah done, you can get the public ready, and you're good to go. But what's happening now is you're creating an avenue for secret paramours, at least a secret paramour, in which two people create in their consciousness an affection for someone else. And like that, it can break. There's no paperwork that involves. One phone call, it's done. One situation, it's gone. One false look, bad situation, people just run away, and that's a problem. Because in reality, we need to make sure that we understand the purpose of these things. My personal engagement, when I informed, and it happened, that I need it done that week. October, I was like to my parents, I need to get married. December 8th, I got married. Yes, December 8th, I got my nikah done. Red. That's quick. It's because what I intended to do. Because when I reached out to the family, what I asked in my interview, I asked very simple questions. I tried to see if the person had a similar lifestyle. They try to sit with you because they want to see if you're familiar with their family, if you're compatible with their family. At that point in time, my questions were very simple to see if the person was willing to do sacrifices just like I would for the Jamaat. At that point in time, to see if the person is looking for a marriage or looking for something else. Because all I needed was a marriage. That's what I'm looking for. That's my goal, to get married. My goal is not to do anything else. And I was able to find the best match for that situation. I didn't go window shopping. And the missionary at that time told me, and it was very good advice, don't go window shopping. Because what you do as a human, you grab one thing and you're like, wait a minute, this is good, but wait, I found something else, but this is better. And then you play this game in which you find one thing, but you're looking for something else. And you hold one engagement and you find something else. That is completely against Islam. That is not what Islam teaches. We are supposed to, when that situation occurs, try to ensure it as much as possible.
Yeah, another good tip I think the missionary shared, and I'm kind of rewording it, is like when you find a potential match, you don't ask like if this person is attractive, or rather you ask like, is this person what's the word that we used?
Compatible.
Compatible, and if this person is not repulsive. So
Yeah.
rather than saying that, okay, this person is this person attractive, and then you'll never really reach an answer. But if you say this person is this person repulsive when looking at potential matches, then you say no. Okay, then if the person is good, then you'll be able to adjust, and that beauty will come as that relationship develops and that love develops.
Yeah, people don't know much about this that are young because they haven't had these situations. When they see someone that's attractive, they're infatuated with them, and then what will happen is that they will kind of formulate an ideal of what that person is in their head. What occurs is that when they formulate that ideal, basically in their head they are attracted to the ideal. Remember the what's it called, example of the father that cut off the hair? Do you want to go through that?
Yeah, we can go through that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So again, the same review of religions article from 2 days ago. The question posed was, my question is about, I'll just get to the question.
Go
Your
ahead.
Holiness, how does Islam define true love? Is love at first sight just a fantasy? Or if I may respectfully ask, how does the concept of love in the West fit into the framework of Islam that His Holiness has outlined in his book on relationships? Is the Western concept of love possible in the Islamic framework, or is it just a fantasy? And Hazur replied, there is an anecdote of a very beautiful girl with long flowing hair who was fair and in pristine health. A boy became deeply infatuated with her and proposed marriage. The father of the girl was fiercely against this union and told the boy, you do not truly love my daughter, rather you only love her outward beauty and features. The boy insisted, no, this is not the case. I do truly love her. And so the father decided to give his daughter a treatment that resulted in her falling very ill. Her stomach became upset and she became very frail, scrawny, and sickly. The father then cut locks from the girl's hair with scissors. In short, the girl's physical and outer appearance fell into a terrible condition. Then the father said to the boy, now look here, this is my daughter. Do you still love her? If you do love her, then by all means go ahead and marry her. Upon this, the boy started to offer excuses to not proceed. Thus the father placed all the girl's hair he had cut off into a bowl. He then said to the boy, now that all her hair has been cut and her apparent beauty has been removed, you say that you do not love her. So take this bowl with her hair and have all of these things, because these are the features that you really love. So go now and take all of this with you. And then Azura says in this, continuing, this was merely superficial love. What happens here in society is that the morals and character of a person are aspects that are demoted and ignored instead of being the focus of affection. Whereas, as a poet has once written, the material and outward features of the world are only temporary and fleeting and will fade away, and love for them is short-lived. This is not real love. Therefore, one needs to develop such love which is true love.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that a lot of boys, what they'll do is they're attracted to the ideal that they created in their heads. They're not attracted to the person. So even when you see someone in class that you're infatuated with, there's always something that occurs that makes you, lose that type of relationship in your head, at least the ideal that you created. That's why, with engagements, it's never a good idea. Because what will occur is that there's an emotional game you play with one another. You know that you're going to get married. So shaitan at that point in time, it's it's almost like you're about to get in the half track and you just stay out there just a little bit. And the German sniper is trying to pick you off right before you go in. That's the best time to get them. Because what occurs is they're just about to enter that fortress. They're sitting outside waiting at the door, rubbing their shoes in the ground, about to go in, and they're still outside. And these problems do occur. They occur very seriously. And it's a big issue because what you're doing is you're going to emotionally damage someone else out of no need. There's no reason why. It doesn't need to be a big event. Just do the nikah. The nikah is more important than anything else in terms of the event. It's the words you're saying, the commitment you have. It's not about what you wear. It's not about what people are serving. As a young boy who's 15 years old, there's one thing we have to understand. These boys, when they see these very expensive weddings, they see a big hurdle to chastity. We have to make sure everyone understands. After nikah, you are married. At that point in time, you are married. You are able to do whatever you want in terms of relationship in a halal way. That is your business with your wife, not with what. That's how we define someone after nikah, your wife. These things that we've introduced due to culture afterwards, these are just cultural items. They'll be burned away in the next 200 years anyway. But the things that remain are the things that Allah Ta'ala has created. Nakah. At that point in time, the reason why we understand these things the proper way, so we can understand why other things exist. The reason why nakah exists and then also walima exists afterwards is so that there's a definition in between when they were allowed, when they had a contract to make, and when the first act of consummation began. Because according to Islam, according to the Quran, if divorce happens between the two, there's only half the dowry that's given. And
Yeah,
the
I
reason
think
why this is, go ahead.
in the Quran, I think the only requirement is the ka, and it's sunnah to do a walima.
Yeah.
Everything else is cultural.
There is a concept of consummation in Islam, and the reason why it's important for people to know.
Then walima occurs after that.
Yeah. The reason why it's important for people to know is that people understand if any child comes about, it's from basically this chaste relationship. And also that if anybody claims divorce, people understand that this was a fully married couple. Now, in order to make it easier for this to occur, marriage should be as simple as possible. In my personal opinion, I want to spend as little money as possible because to me, what's more important, I am not looking for what I look like running up the beach. I don't care about the golden streaks in my uniform. I don't care about having a golden watch. I care about getting up the beach because I see so many people mowed down in the process. It does not matter anymore. The money needs to be completely ignored. These fancy things mean nothing to these kids at this point in time. No one looks back and says, oh man, that $30,000 I spent on my wedding, it was very worth it. It culturally enriched my entire experience and allowed me to live a very, very pious life. That's not what people say. Most people, if they're...
Yeah, sometimes these expensive or multiple steps and complicated weddings are hurdles to actually marry somebody within the Jamaat because they're like, oh, I can't afford it. This is too complicated. And I think like one of the first things that we can do is decrease the number of functions because every new day there's like new hall, new food, new clothes, new photographer, new decorations. You instead of having like 6 functions, you decrease them. And then that's, probably one of the initial ways to save expenditure and complication. And then, it's fine, gifts are fine, but like, to make it a requirement of gifts from this side, clothes are going from here, clothes are going from there. All this jewelry and this and that. Basically, people have to spend according to their means.
Yeah.
And not compete with one another and use it as a means to show off or something like that.
I think my nakah cost me around $800. I'll be honest. It was in Pakistan, so it probably was not that much. But the thing is that can you imagine if I opened up a bill every month for my interest payment for the wedding that I spent $30,000 on? I wouldn't be thinking it's a blessing. I'd be like, why the heck did I do? What purpose did I do this? That 10 years later, I'm still paying off the interest. Like I bought a car, like I bought a luxury car that I can't do anything with right now. And at that point in time, it becomes a point of contention between the husband and wife.
And like, people should be supportive. If somebody does happen to go to a foreign country to marry and they do all their functions there and just to keep expenditure down, then maybe they don't do much back where they live because we don't want to have multiple functions, receptions, and this and that.
The point of marriage is not to show off that the fact that they're married. The point of marriage is to preserve chastity. So if we make that our goal, if we make that our focus, then it's a blessed marriage. However, if the point of marriage is to create a situation in which people boast about how much money they have, you'll be able to boast how much money you have. However, the other things you forfeit. When you focus on vanity, then Allah Ta'ala gives you exactly what you want. Exactly what you want in terms of what you desire. However, then there's a decree that you'll get a response to that based upon what the laws of nature are. So if your goal is to make money, if your goal is to get money, you'll get the money. However, you won't get the other thing that's required, which is chastity. In that situation, you'll create a situation in which there's turmoil. What you want to do is you want to make it easy I'm talking about as a society. You want to make it easy as possible. You want to make it so that a 14, 15-year-old can say that maybe with this system, it makes it easy for me to get married by the time I'm 16 years old. However, even then there's still hurdles. Like for example, where do you house somebody who's that young? How do you have a situation in which they can get married and they can move in together later on? These things are things we have to work on. We have to abide by them. We have to figure out solutions for them. It's not that we can just dismiss them because our society doesn't allow them, and not allow in terms of legal, but allow them in terms of people find it unheard of. Go ahead.
I was saying basically that money that you can save or we save from these weddings can actually be spent on the Mariam Shadi Fund, for example, help other people with their weddings. And this is
Yeah.
something that, all of us can improve on, including ourselves, myself, or
And people,
some things that we could have done better.
and I remember a question answered with the fourth Khalifa about people supporting their kids after they get married. If I had a situation in which I had to support my daughter after she got married and I still had to put her through school and pay for her housing, I would, because for me, that's a much better investment than to be, flipping about it and have my daughter marry at the age of like 35 years old when she has to struggle to get one child to be birthed. My point is I want to make it as easy for her as possible. People at this time say that there's no women available. How are we going to support? They're so confused. I imagine if I was a father, I have a daughter in my house, you have a daughter in your house, I have a son, you have a son. Why don't we just marry the daughters off and then switch the daughters, and then she lives here with your son in a specific private room, and I can do the same thing for my daughter at your place, and we can pay money for each other to keep each other afloat. Why don't we sacrifice a little bit of ourselves so both of our families can progress? People have to be more empathetic, because what will occur is if we all sit at home and keep our daughters and sons separated away from one another, what will occur is they'll look elsewhere. They'll get curious. And at that point in time, we're scratching our heads thinking, why are they dead on the beach? It's kind of obvious why they're dead on the beach. It's because we've ignored them. It's like locking a cat in a room and then coming back 3 days later, be like, why'd the cat die? Because you didn't feed it. That's exactly what occurred. You have to be logical about this. You're in a situation, literally, we live in the worst of times for humanity, the Dajjal, a system created that is perpetuated by the Zaleen, by those who are left astray. The Dajjal being the great deceiver, that's designed to create a situation in which people's minds are basically taken from them, reorganized, and redistributed to them for their worst way of life, to make them into slaves. And right now, the tools we have to get up this beach, people are ignoring these tools. They're ignoring the half track, they're ignoring the armor, they're ignoring the fortress. And let's just run up this beach and whatever happens is whatever happens. It's fine. And then when they get shot up, and then literally we have a generation that's lost now, people are wondering, where are all the young kids? They're all gone. Thanos snapping his fingers has nothing on people with unchaste lives. He took 50% away. We have an entire generation gone because of this. We have to understand that we have to make these sacrifices now. If we don't take the initiative to educate people, that when people tell us things that are based upon their perception of what society is now, it's going to cause problems for the future. And what will occur is that people are not going to have a fun time. Go ahead, say what you're going to say, and I'm going to just say a disclaimer before you end this.
Should I say my thing I want to say last?
Go ahead, you can say it, because we have to take probably a question.
Okay. Basically, I guess one of the last things we wanted to say was, when we do these things, we have to ask ourselves, like, am I doing this for God's pleasure? Am I sincerely? We have to ask ourselves, or to sincerely ask our hearts, like, am I looking at this person? Am I texting this person? Am I dating this person? Am I looking at this lewd content online? Am I engaging in auto stimulation? Am I trying to jump through some kind of loopholes to make this or convert marriage work? Am I all doing this for God's pleasure, or am I being sincere about this? Am I when I'm playing eye games, it's all about, like, man can be fooled, we can all be fooled, but God cannot be fooled. He is the all seeing and all hearing. So it's like, there are marriages that are legitimate and done out of sincerity, but only the person who's doing it, and God knows whether it's done out of sincerity. It's something something we always ask ourselves, am I doing this for God's pleasure, or am I just doing this to fulfill my own desires?
Yeah, we're not missionaries, and we're basically people who are born and raised here. We're both Waqf. We've dedicated our time since birth to the Jamaat. However, we have to understand that when we answer questions, we'll take probably one or two questions. I'd rather do it in the second session. We'll do one or two now, but we have a second section that'll come up most likely a week or two from now. National Debate Secretary will help us out during that session. He'll be live, and we're going to ask him details about these words and what they mean. And we're going to ask him just to clarify, and then we'll have a question and answer session in which, you can ask him questions. And then if you like, we can have part 3. We can just have us answering questions. If you like the way we speak and the way we answer things, the way we look at things, we can definitely help you out. I wanted to say, I forgot what I was going to say, the last item. In terms of this, we always have to understand that we have a perception of how things should work, but when they don't work, we have to reflect back about what the Quran teaches. And when we do so, I understand people have their own perception of things and they have their own opinion how things should work. But if things aren't working, we have to change the way we live our lives. If we don't, we fall susceptible to the problems that occur. We can't blame anyone else but ourselves. At this specific time, what's been happening now is it's almost like a massacre. We've lost so many people because of the things that didn't occur. We were mentioning, I think it was mentioned during the speech in Jalsa Salana. I don't know what year it was, but Balarana said that in his demographic, I think it was like only 28% married. Thanos 50%.
Within the Jamaat.
Yeah,
Like I think 70% married outside the Jamaat, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Thanos 50% got nothing on on chastity issues, because if the Quran mentions it very strongly that if chastity is not abided, it destroys. It's an evil way. This fornication's evil way. Every avenue of it. So we'll take a question or two if anyone has a question. Anaji, I don't know how we're gonna take this. Like probably one question would be fine for now.
Yeah, so we'll try to stick to the time limit of 10:30.
Okay.
So we'll just go ahead and take the questions with raised hands. A couple of them came in as well through the chat box option. So until 10:30, we'll keep taking questions, but we'll try to wrap up. There are a couple of announcements that need to come through as well, so we'll save the last 2-3 minutes for that. So the first question coming out is from Saud Qureshi. I see you raising your hand. I'm going to unmute you. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so based on the presentation, it was a good presentation, but I have a question. What's the right age to get married?
Well, I mean, according to Hazur's question, and somebody asked Hazur about that. It's when before you have those desires becoming a problem. So the age of puberty, that would be the ideal to do. So before those desires become sinful, that's what we want to do. We want to avoid to have those sinful desires outside the fortress of chastity, which is marriage.
Jazakallah.
Go ahead. Anyone
I
else?
Yeah.
think the takeaway point here is that marrying at maturity, and that's one main
Yeah.
takeaway point here.
You have to the mental maturity that's required. We have to aim as a community, as a group, to try to get that as young as possible, because we can't have kids running off that boat not knowing where to go. Basically what you're doing is you're winging them. If you don't make them mentally mature at the right age, they're physically mature, you can't control that. That happens like an attack without any control. It won't happen. And for the fathers who have young daughters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It just sneaks up on you because your perception of your daughter before and after the age of puberty, you're just sitting there with your head spinning, thinking what's happening. Anyone else have a question?
So another question comes in. This brother's asking for a clarification. The question is, marrying a believing slave woman is better than non-believers, or whatever was said. So I think he's asking for clarification on that. The brother asks, who are the believing handmaids in current day? What does it mean, what your right hand possesses? I think they're asking if this verse still applies today and how it would apply today.
Yeah, we can ask that to Missionary Sab. I can't go into too much detail about topics outside the commentary, so I want him to answer those in strong detail. You have to understand, I'm not a missionary. I'm not a like a scholar that knows beyond the commentary that's written here. All we basically did is, and it's pretty simple, anyone can do this, is we took the long commentary and just read it. That's all we did. We didn't go anything beyond that. The long commentary and the Quran dictionary. That's it. So we'll have, Amrabi Sab answer those detailed questions.
And that session will be with Mulkum Tarbiyat Sab, right? As Mulkum Sab?
Yes, yeah.
Inshallah. So if there are any other additional questions, go ahead and raise your hand now or send them in. We'll keep it for another minute or two. And then we can, inshallah, close out. I think you did a really good job covering all the bases. I had some questions along the way as well, but it seemed that you kept coming to the answers every time.
Yeah, we try to keep this pretty comprehensive. We went through A to Z as much as we could. There are other topics we can talk about in much detail. I mean, for example, like, going for Rishte, talking to the Qawwamun, that's very important, to talk to the Wali. If you're not talking to the Wali, I don't know at that point in time who's authorized to do that interview, because the example we had was the Wali. And the Wali being the guardian, the one that's appointed to recite the Nakah.
I think a question just came in, so we'll take this as the last question. Does Islam say anything about if you're physically unable?
Yeah, this comes in. For example, Allah Ta'ala has a plan for us. However, if you have a physical problem, everyone has tests, and I'll say what I know from. I want Missionary Sahib to give a better example, but we all are basically tested on the things we have deficiencies on. For example, if you are 16 years old and no one's marrying their daughter off to you, you can't control that. You can't. At that point in time, that's when you have to basically avoid as much as you can. And you are tested not beyond your capability. So it's not a situation in which you have, in which at that point in time, you're judged based upon someone else's capability. Say somebody who's married or has that situation. You're based it upon what you're able to do. So Allah Ta'ala is also very forgiving too. We have to understand that this situation is to create a society, a community. It's a standard that we have to basically go by. However, if there are people who are lacking, that's no fault of their own. For example, in the situation of marriage, we talked about marrying those who are muhsinati, mu'minati, but at the same time, if there's a female who is not of the highest caliber of what we expect, we have to make sure they're married off too. And as men, if all the men are married off, that's when polygamy comes in. We have to make sure that we provide the ability for everybody. The Quran doesn't say and marry off only those and then keep only one person for each person. It says marry off those who are of the unmarried. And also in other verses it says that for men to marry, and if they can be just amongst the wives, to marry multiple. That's why these things exist, because these are problems that occur. It's not one girl gets married, one boy gets married, and then only one girl is left. It's 100 boys get married, 100 girls get married, and there's still 100 girls just sitting there wondering what to do.
I think there's a verse in the Holy Quran that I think it says surely we've been created a man to toil and struggle. So it's a test, but you're not burdened beyond your actual capacity.
Jazakallah. We're coming right up on 10:30, so we'll inshallah wrap it up. I'll just make a couple quick announcements. So the announcements are in regards to the sessions moving forward. Inshallah, tomorrow night we have a very special session planned for everybody, which will be a question and answer session with respected Naib Amir Saab, Dr. Fahim Yunus Qureshi, in which he'll be taking questions in regards to COVID-19 impact it's had on our lives. A lot of times we're seeing these a lot of false information about COVID-19. So who better to ask questions than a leading expert in the field? So inshallah, Naib Amir Saab will be covering questions about COVID-19, the impact on our lives, in addition to some tarbiyat related topics and how we can best approach Ramadan coming up as Ahmadi Muslims. So inshallah, there's a can't miss session. So inshallah, I recommend everybody take the time tomorrow to come for that question and answer session with Naib Amir Saab. The final note again is about the concluding session with respected Naib Amir Saab. Again, as the note has been made, this session has a limited number of seats. And again, this is a session that will have a lot of attendance, inshallah. But we are requesting all of our brothers to please try and attend as early as possible. We want to get as many khuddam into this session before respected Amir Saab. The cutoff for entering is 2:45 p.m. So again, I recommend all khuddam brothers try to enter the meeting as early as possible so we can have entered before respected Amir Saab attends. So that's it for the announcements. First, I just want to say jazakallah to Abdul Salam Bhai, Tasir Bhai, and Zubair for the amazing session. It was really well encompassing, covered a lot of topics, and I definitely learned a lot throughout the session. And jazakallah to the whole National Tarbiyat team for putting this all together. You guys are amazing, great stuff.
Jazakallah.
So inshallah, we'll see everybody tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Again, come with your questions ready. If you're hearing some WhatsApp rumors about how you can cure coronavirus, you might want to, this is probably the best person to ask for clarification. So again, if you have any questions, bring them tomorrow, and inshallah, see everybody tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.